Welcome, everybody. This is Gaelan, Trombley. I don't know why I just said that. That's weird. So I'm doing my mic here. We got a big crowd here today. So this is episode 294 of the Gaelan Trombley Show. We have Sweethearts and Heroes. Tom has been on before. If you have not seen Tom, he's the guy with the free hug shirt. You probably have seen him on social media or somewhere. He's wearing the free hug shirt. You said that's all you wear, right? That's doing the outfit?
Going on my 9th year, haven't missed a day in 9 years.
And you've worn it to weddings?
Everything, dude. Funerals, weddings. My speaking partner, Rick, was so pissed when I showed up to his wedding. His, like, $50,000 wedding in a free hug shirt. He's like, really? You're going to wear that to my wedding?
So Tom is one of the most on-brand people I know. And then we have a couple guests today. So we have a couple high schoolers, which Tom asked me if I wanted to have high schoolers on. I typically say, and you guys are graduating this year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You guys are the first high school people I've ever had on here. Young adults, right, Tom?
Wow. Young adults.
Young adults. But Tom asked, and I thought it would be kind of cool to get perspective from, teenagers that are actually going through the program and have seen it firsthand. And I think your perspective is going to, far surpass my perspective or even Tom's perspective, or at least offer a different perspective. And we got a couple of film crew people here, so I want to give Loudon and Abby a shout out. Maybe we'll put you on the mic, maybe not. I think the last time we had the book writer here.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, and he, I think, might have had a cameo on the mic, so we'll see. But, okay, so anybody who wants to start, introduce yourself, however you want to do. Tom, if you want to be our MC, go ahead. But I appreciate you guys coming back here.
Yeah, well, let me just kick it off by 16 years in the makings, Sweethearts and Heroes. And we estimate we've probably spoken to almost 2 million students, parents, educators, community members. This was probably one of the greatest years of my life with the organization. You have a dream when you start something, and it's pretty cool when it comes to fruition. From day one, the Sweethearts and Heroes message has been about empowering young people to be the change, especially within their peer and their social networks. That's what our message has been about from day one. And, you can have these fanciful ideas to empower young people to, really make a sustainable, long-lasting change within their school. And we have all these initiatives as adults, as educators, and we bring this stuff to young people, and we say, oh, let's do this, let's do that. But it doesn't stick. And, I've had this conversation with lots of educators this year. What other program in the last decade have you been part of that is stuck? And I think that's really what separates our message. And it's really because we ask the young people to be that change. And then we let them be that change. And you have two beautiful examples here. And I have a little bit deeper of a relationship with Haley. She actually did opening day with me this year.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and I'll zip it right after this, but it was something I did once before. And when her school asked me to do opening day this year, I said, under one condition, you let me do it with a couple of students, but don't tell the teachers. So I did my little opening, and about 25 minutes into it, I said, all the faculty, with middle school, high school, elementary, the bus drivers, they were all there. And I said, and I brought a couple real live superheroes with me. And then that cheesy Bonnie Tyler song, Where Have All the Heroes Gone, comes on, and here comes Haley down the aisle.
Yep.
And she gave really one of the most impactful speeches I've heard in the last decade of my life. And then my buddy Liam here, we kind of found him under a rock, but he's a very philosophical young man that is kind of what really attracts me to him is he's going to break a bit of the mold. And what I mean by that is he's electing not to go to college next year because he wants to pursue his heart and not just fit into the mold that a lot of young people just fit into because their parents want them to. So really a couple of neat young people that really have a huge impact on their peer networks and the entire culture of their school, these two right here.
All right, so Haley, let me get this. Sorry, folks, we got a lot of people here, so I want to make sure I'm hitting the right dials. Okay, that's a little better, so blow you out of here. So, Haley, tell us about, we'll start at opening day. So what's opening day like? tell us where you did it, and then kind of give us a kind of a recap. How did that work?
So opening day at my school, it occurred in the auditorium. All of the faculty members, kindergarten through 12th grade, were there. And actually, the funny thing is, both of my parents are teachers at our school building, and they had no idea that I was coming.
Awesome.
So Tom and I kind of set up this plan, this scheme almost, to have me enter secretly, and they had no idea that I was there. I mentioned, I believe, my mom in the speech, because my mom and I, we've had an interesting relationship throughout my childhood. But it was a cool experience, and I had a lot of people come up to me afterwards and say, I've had a lot of opening day type presentations, because the teachers always start before the students do, and they go through meeting after meeting after meeting. My whole life, my parents come home from their first day of work and they're like, yeah, we had a bunch of BS meetings today. Like, we ran through the motions. But I had a lot of people who I had as teachers, and some who I had never had as teachers, come up to me and say, that was impactful. And I wasn't the only student who did it. We had another student come on and give another speech. But it set the tone for the school year. And having kids come up, and like Tom said, the Sweethearts and Heroes program allows us to be the change. I've never been given the opportunity or had the option to speak in front of all of the faculty at my school and offer them a perspective that they haven't heard before. So it was a really cool way of starting the school year off with student perspective, because I don't think that anybody in our district had ever done that or experienced that before.
So were you speaking? Was it like a story you told? Was it just your experience? Like, what was the topic, or what did you kind of focus on in the speech?
I focused on, it was beginning of this year, so beginning of my senior year. I basically gave a recap of my high school experience, and my high school experience has been very difficult. 9th and 10th grade were very hard years for me, and everybody in my district knows that. I wasn't able to hide it very well. I was very clearly struggling with a lot of things. But 11th grade, everybody noticed this shift in me. And I had always had really good grades, but it was always a really hard effort for me. I was struggling really bad to keep those good grades. In 11th grade, all of a sudden, I was doing it very easily, very naturally. I was very happy doing it. And people kind of raised an eyebrow, like, what's going on? Like, what happened? Not that it was a bad change, it was a good change, but people in our district definitely knew that. And I talked about that, and I talked about the why. And the why was Sweethearts and Heroes. Middle of 10th grade, Tom came to our school and gave his presentation with Rick. Long story short, my perspective shifted on that day, and while it didn't happen overnight, it allowed me to sort of make changes in my life in order to give myself a happier life, and like I was just living a better lifestyle overall. I made choices. I switched the sports that I was doing. I changed clubs that I was doing. I found my people, and I had to choose to find my people. It didn't just happen. But I talked about that, and I talked about how Sweethearts and Heroes gave me hope. That's their whole message. That's the whole message of their presentation that they gave. And I think it really struck a lot of people. There was a bunch of people crying after my speech, a bunch of teachers who were emotional afterwards.
You know what's interesting about that? You're looking at the valedictorian of Ticonderoga.
Congrats, yeah.
And you're also looking, there's another V in her life, too.
Yeah.
She got accepted.
I wear this every day.
She got accepted
Is
to
that
Vanderbilt.
Yes.
Oh, Vanderbilt?
Yeah.
Nice.
So,
Yes.
Going to Tennessee, right?
Yeah,
Nashville?
Nashville.
Yeah.
yeah. So what's just so cool about her story for me is, people talk about the one-time event at a school. You have these ignition events, and we don't do the one and done. But after 15, 16 years of this, the one and done, the ignition, and Malcolm Gladwell talks a lot about this in one of his books, is how important ignition is. Now, voltage will definitely drop over time, and that's, I think, where our work, as we embed ourselves into a district and we do some of our programming as a follow-up, whether it's our circle work, our BRAVE programming, our full set of classes that Liam has actually been a part of for several years now. But the other interesting thing about Haley is it is so difficult your 10th, 11th grade year to upset the social fabric of the culture that you're part of. It's almost impossible. There's nothing more important in a young person's life than their peer network. I mean, you can remember back when you were 9th, 10th, 11th grade, the only thing that mattered to you was your friends. And you did some really stupid things because of your friends.
Yeah.
And it drove everything. And that's really at the heart of this message. So when we find someone like Haley that gets ignited by this message, that's always what we're looking for. We're looking for the gatekeepers. We're looking for the kids that have prestige. It's an ancient set of circuits that human beings have that you just can't deny. You know, when I was a kid, and I'll make this quick because, we definitely want to, throw Liam.
There you go.
I got a friend of mine named Leon, so if I call you Leon a few times,
It's all
sorry.
good.
It's a compliment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a compliment. Well, if you knew
sure.
Leon, you wouldn't think it was
No.
a compliment. He's listening. Crap, I forgot where I was at. I do this to myself.
You're talking about,
What was it?
Ancient set of circuits.
Yeah,
just
the spark.
and this is so, I said for years to teachers, for almost a decade, because, our message really revolves around empowering young people to be the change, and for those young people to help the other young people within that peer network that's struggling. I got thousands and thousands of stories of that actually happening. But you have to get to the ones that have the prestige. And it's called the prestige bias if you look this up. And, for years I said to teachers, what was the name of that kid who wasn't treated the right way when you were in school? And the funny thing is, Gaelan, you can still remember the name of that student that wasn't treated the right way when you were in school. It was a kid named Brian Lindstadt when I was in school. He was the weird, different kid that was an easy mark, easy target for other people to make fun of. And empathy has been cut in half in the last 30 years in our high school to college bound students. Been cut in half. And that's devastating because empathy is the only reason we're here as human beings. Because we've learned to share resources with one another and help people that are in distress so that when we're in distress, people help us. That's empathy. And that's been cut in half in a generation. So when we look at this young person, right, and for those of you not watching this, I've got the loser sign on my forehead, right, that big L. That kid, when you were in school, Gaelan, didn't have much of an opportunity to receive empathy from his or her peer. That kid today, not a shot. So it's easy to point out the deficit, and that's the deficit that we're up against in America today. But you can't live in a deficit, and you can't work from a deficit position. You have to work from a position of strength. So what's the strength in that peer network, right? It's the influencers, it's the gatekeepers. And they're the ones that set the tone for the peer network that drives everything. And this is directly from Dr. Peter Weinman from the University of Rochester, says that young people always set unhealthy social norms. You know what I mean? Because you did really stupid things because of your buddies. Mm-hmm. But if the conditions are right, and you can tap into the right young people, they'll also set good, healthy, adaptive social norms that they will transmit to their friends and their peer network. And that's the secret. But you got to let them discover it, let them figure it out, and let them be part of that change or institute that change almost completely by themselves. And if you empower them to do that, the entire fabric changes. Now, I'll land on this. You were thinking about this kid, the kid that wasn't treated the right way when you were in school. You probably have his name right here in the front of your mind. But take it from a strength-based perspective. Gaelan, what was the name of that young person when you were in 7th, 8th, 9th grade? That was the frickin' bomb. He or she was a junior or senior. If that kid told you to stand up on the roof of the school and pee off the side, you wouldn't have even questioned it because they were the frickin' man. Mm-hmm. For me, it was Ricky Reach. 6'4", 6'5", 250 pounds. Dunks a basketball in a game, shatters the backboard. True story. And Ricky Reach didn't know who the heck I was. But if Ricky Reach was holding a door for a marginalized student, mm-hmm. for a teacher that other people hated, you know who would have been standing right next to him? Little Tommy Murphy. Because he set all of the social norms. And that's what you have here in front of you is two young people that, and what Haley did was very difficult. Because when you're running with a certain track of young people, in 9th grade, 10th grade, you're developing these really strong relationships, these bonds, to switch that off and to run in a different direction, a positive direction, almost impossible for a young person.
Did you feel that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It felt nearly impossible at a lot of points in time. It was very, very hard, but it was very worth it.
And Liam, I'm going to jump to you in a sec. So when you, as a kid, like Tom, you just said, actually, Tom, can you pull that mic just a little bit forward?
This way?
Yeah.
I'm a little
just
too
like
hot?
Angle it, huh? No, I was picking up like a distant. I want to hear your full voice.
Oh, my full,
Your
rich voice. That made me feel good.
There you go. You had a good radio voice. It's good. So when you, like, again, when you take kids, and this is just in general, like I'm in my mid 30s. I was your age, 20, almost 20 years ago now, and I look at even today, we're still, not as much, meaning we still have friends, you still have a social circle. It's tough to break out of any type of circle that you're in. I would say it's a little maybe easier now because we kind of, as I've gotten older, I have the less, like, I don't care as much what people think. But if I flash back to when I was in high school, totally not what I am now, where you would be thinking, okay, my buddy or this person, or like you said, we do dumb stuff because of just trying to fit in, and it's not even maybe the crowd we want to fit in, but in our minds we're so young and impressionable that we're just like, that is maybe kind of the cool kid or the bad boy or whatever that you want to become maybe popular with or charismatic with. But I would say that looking at younger people now, do you guys find it hard just with the connectivity that you guys have? Because again, when I was a kid, one of the things that, and I think we talked about this last time, Tom, when the bell rang, we went home. Like, that was it. We had AIM, but this was like before we really could like go full out with our phones and things like that. So did you guys find it, or still do find, is there a struggle where, hey, we leave school and I don't actually leave school because my social circle's in my pocket and it's coming with me? Is that something to break out of, or does that reinforce potentially the relationships that you had? Or maybe you had, Liam, where it's like, hey, I just can't really escape this. I don't get that break. I don't get that, like, let me just go home and chill and see my family or maybe a couple friends. But like right now, I just feel like you guys are living like a 24/7 cycle of just social, which is good, but it's also, I would think, exhausting, where you just kind of want to hit the pause button or just go hide out for a bit and say, like, don't talk to me. I just want like some alone time. So is that hard at your age?
To break out of that, certainly. To break out of that reliance. I think of it as a reliance. I think of it as an addiction.
You're saying like social media and things
cell
like
phone
that.
use and social media specifically. Yep. I think it's really corrosive. I don't think it's good. I don't really think it's a good thing at all. And I'll get into why. Amongst our peers, we're so connected, right, that we're almost disconnected. You go into actually recently we had this phone ban in school, and I don't know if your school
Next
like
year.
yeah, we got
Next
like a
year.
pre thing,
Yep.
so it wasn't so much pandemonium next year. But I think that's a phenomenal thing, because I used to go into school earlier this year, just a couple months ago. And I would go into class or whatever, or be in study hall, and absolutely everybody is on their phone. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know if they're texting their parents. You don't know if they're scrolling. You don't know if they're posting something bad about somebody. You just know that they're on their phone. And that is a social signal not to go talk to them, in my opinion. It's just like the good old example, like if you go out to eat with your grandparents or whatever, and well, if another person goes out to eat with their grandparents or whatever, and that younger person's on their phone, and their grandparents are across the table from them, it's scary. And they say, oh yeah, I'm texting my buddy Matt. He's got some really important stuff going on in his life right now, but so do you. You're at dinner, you're at lunch, you're at dinner, you're at something with your grandparents. You only get so many amount of years with them. You only get so many lessons from them. You just get so much time. You only get so much time. And just the way that you spend that time is very important. And with social media, and especially that, TikTok, where you could scroll for hours and hours and hours and hours.
The
and
doom
hours.
scroll?
Oh, that's what it is. It's exactly a doom scroll. And I feel like that's mostly what people are doing now. Mm-hmm. They have that. They always have their phone on them, of course, but they have the good old excuse, in case anything happens to me, I'll text my mom or whatever. I'm sure that's very functional, and people in the past, they didn't have that before, and that's a very positive thing. But I think it's an excuse now, and it's an excuse to have it, and it's an excuse to get that easy dopamine in your brain.
Yep.
It's literally, it's corrosive. It really is to your brain. And just like I go for Instagram or whatever, you see, the popular kids at your school or whatever, they're in Cancun for, the spring break or whatever, and they're posing with all these people, and you're just like, I want to be there. I want to be those people. I want to be that person. I want to experience these things. But a lot of people don't realize that that's their highlight reel. That's not their well, it's their real life. They experience these things, and at what cost, we'll never know. But some people will think, wow, this is reality. I'm seeing reality right now. I ought to be doing this. I ought to abandon all my things I got going for me and all my relationships. I got to go do that. I got to go do what that person, is doing. And I feel like that's very wrong. That's conformity at its finest. And the social media and cell phone use only exponentiates that. And people just need to be more, they need to have a better relationship with themselves and not with others and their phone. Like you say, we're so connected, right? We're so connected. Like I said earlier, we're so connected that we're disconnected in a way.
Do you guys feel that this goes with you? Like I said, obviously in school, we didn't have cell phones when I was in school, so Tom, probably not, right?
No.
So I'm going to give Tom. When did you graduate high school? If you don't mind me asking.
What episode are we on?
Episode 2. Want me asking episode 3?
No. What episode is this for your podcast?
Oh, 294.
There you go.
Okay.
94.
It's a good year, right?
It's a good year.
Yeah.
That's the year I graduated.
That's it.
Yeah. 94.
So when you look at like something like Tom didn't experience it, I didn't experience it. I do think, I do remember like school. You had social circles and cliques and things like that. But once you left, we had your buddies and stuff at home, but you didn't really get. So if you were, I know obviously a big part of Sweethearts and Heroes is obviously the aspect of bullying and acceptance or anti-bullying and acceptance and things like that. If you were getting bullied, you at least could go home and kind of get away from it. But I feel like a lot of kids now, and I think, again, we talked about this last time, with just the connectivity, it ends up just kind of following you wherever you go just because you have it. And again, social media, these companies make a ton of money getting your attention. Yeah. So the whole purpose is that dopamine hit, they want you to have it because for them, they make advertising dollars, and it's the whole economic cycle of that. And it's hard to break out. Even someone, I feel like as you get older, depending, you typically have a little bit more going on where it's like you maybe can't scroll as much as some kid that just kind of mindlessly scroll. But there are adults that do it too, and they just can't break out of that habit. So then when you look at, I go back to people that are older that I would think at some point in time realize like this is probably not the best use of my time. When you're younger though, like you said, it's you're trying to keep up with the Joneses as a teenager. When you do realize it's kind of your Cancun trip, like they probably missed their flight. It rained most of the days. That might have been their only good beach day they had. You don't know that. It just looks like they had this utopia for a week, and then you're sitting there at home in Peru at your house, hanging out with your buddies and doing just kind of normal things or having like a staycation, and it doesn't make one bad or good or bad or worse or better. It just happens to be they posted and made it look really cool, and you're like, well, what do I have to post now to kind of maybe one up them or keep kind of keep stride with these people? Or really, at the end of the day, I think you mentioned, just kind of and it's tough, but the self-love or whatever you want to call it, where it's like you just kind of, you're cool with who you are. And I think that goes back to, I don't want to go too deep yet because I do want to come back to your origin story here. But when we go back to what you said before about, kind of that complete 180, it's not easy to do. And then to actually kind of go against the grain and say, hey, I'm going to completely change it. I'm going to accept myself for who I am and kind of find your people or find your tribe or whoever really, connects with you. And then I would assume it sounds like you now feel like you're maybe rowing with the current versus against it.
Yeah.
Or you got some people helping you row the boat now versus maybe.
I definitely do feel like I'm rolling with the current. And I think that I will feel that more once I do get to college. I really like what you said about how the whole social media thing and the connectivity, it is conformity at its finest. That truly is what it is. You can never get a break. And as a young person, and especially during those key developmental years, like 14, 15, maybe even 13, when you always know what other people are doing and how they feel and how they think, what they're posting, who they're texting, everything, you're always viewing their locations on Snapchat. You can see when they were last active. You know, you can see if somebody is leaving you undelivered or unopened. And it's not something that you should be worrying about, but, you know, it's in the back of your mind when you're on all of these apps all the time, and spending so much time occupied with that sort of thing regarding other people, it leaves you no time to occupy your own mind and to figure out who you are as an individual during those key years. And like personally, that's why I was at such a low point in 9th and 10th grade, because I spent so much time learning so much about other people and what they did, like where their vacations were, if they went to Cancun or not. Like I didn't know who I was because I wasn't spending time trying to figure it out. I was spending time figuring other people out and comparing other people to myself, which I know you're not supposed to do that, but it's human nature. Everybody compares themselves to other people, especially young, preteen, like that age group. It's very, very difficult. So I personally think that social media does have a lot of perks. However, you have to learn how to use it in the correct way. When I was doing my whole 180 thing, I deleted everything. I deleted every form of social media for 6 months. I did not go on it at all. I couldn't. I had to figure out who I was aside from the media and aside from everybody else's highlight reels.
So when you did that, are you back on some type of
I
social
am.
media? So
Yeah.
when you took maybe the 6-month cleanse and just kind of, you know, disconnected, was there like a relapse where like you had to like fight off like I gotta check for a couple weeks, like I'm checking my phone because I feel like a notification's going off? And then did you have that, and at what stage of the 6 months did you feel like this is better?
I'm not lying.
Or was
when I
it better,
say
or
this.
was it worse?
Within a week, it felt better. It did not take long.
Did you
at
just feel
all.
like the weight lifted off your shoulders?
The stress was gone. The weight of having to know what other people were doing in their lives was gone. And I was still connecting with people face to face at school and doing activities through school in person. So it wasn't like I was completely disconnected. At times it did feel very, very lonely, because when I got home from my school day and I got home from my sports practice and I came home and that was it. And it was weird. It was eerie at first because I had never done that.
What did you do when you got home? If you weren't scrolling, what did you replace the scrolling with?
I would focus on working out. I would
Okay.
work out all the time. I would run. I'd take my dogs for walks. I'd try to talk to my parents a little bit more. Yeah. I'd do my schoolwork. I spent a lot of time just trying new things. Like I got a gym membership my sophomore year. Tried that out. Tried weightlifting with my dad. And I had a lot of time to think about what I wanted to do. And at first, like months 1, 2, and 3, that was very, very difficult, having so much time to think freely. But once I got past like the 3-month mark, I'd say I was able to think as an individual. Yes. And I had established some sort of individuality. And that feels incredibly good. To know who you are just a little bit more.
I'm glad that was cool. You replaced bad habits with better habits.
Yeah.
It sounds like. And
yeah.
There was a quote I heard last guest we had. I'm going to paraphrase it, but basically most problems in life come from our inability to sit by ourselves for our thoughts.
Yes.
Meaning that we're just busybodies and we just want to do stuff, and it's like, you know, if you told most people to go sit just in a room, just sit down, sit on the couch, just sit with yourself. Yeah. Think. You don't even have to meditate. Just like sit there and think. Most of us would go into that boredom phase, which is natural. But what happens, and again, once you get past the boredom phase, that's typically where like creative thoughts come, because you're thinking. You don't have the stimulus of, you know, kind of these pings. I know personally, some of the most calming, peaceful times in my life are the days where like I have no cell coverage, which is awesome. If you drive through the Adirondacks and realize like call drops or you know the phone doesn't work. I was driving out to Syracuse a couple weeks ago, and I went through the heart of the Adirondacks, a little bit west of where you live, and you're driving through there, and there's no cell service for a solid probably hour, and it was the most beautiful thing. Obviously the roads it was a great view, but just riding, like nobody can contact me. I'm like, whatever happens right now, I don't have to react to it. I'm just like with myself. I was listening to a podcast, just enjoying, like had a coffee. It was peaceful, but it's funny. It's like we know, hey, shut the phone off more and more, but it's always a good reminder. So, Liam, I'll throw it over to you. Give us the origin story. I want to hear about how'd you get. Well, who are you, and then how'd you get hooked up with Sweethearts and Heroes?
Okay. That second part of the question, who am I? My name's Liam Clowney. I go to Peru, winding down my time at Peru. I was, just to rewind a little bit, my mother and father split up when I was pretty young. And my mother initially got custody over me, and she lived in Keysville. So I went to Ausable from 5th grade to 8th grade. And that ties in well with Sweethearts and Heroes and Tom Murphy, because I think it was 7th grade before COVID, because that was my COVID year, 7th grade beforehand. Rick and Tom Murphy, they did the presentation at Ausable. Huh. And I remember being starstruck. I remember feeling something.
Rick or me?
It was you both.
Oh, okay.
It was you both.
Just Rick.
Yep. But it was really, I like to say primal. It was really a feeling that you can't describe. It's just there, you know? But I was going through this stage of conformity because I had been going to this new school. It was a new environment. And in 5th grade, like I got like kind of in with the popular guys or whatever. And, you know, I saw them as my family. You see, these are my ride or dies, man, you know? That was in elementary school, 5th and 6th grade. And those are the best times of my life, or in school, rather. We would always, you know, Keysville, it's a small little town, a lot of hills, a lot of fields and whatnot. So we would always get our baseball gloves, and we'd get a football, and we'd hop on our bicycles, and we'd go down to JC Park, and we'd spend the whole day there. And, you know, we would go fishing and all this stuff. It was the most, accepted, like, I've ever really been in. But then I started to realize that these guys, on some of their thought processes and things, they're starting to, like, infiltrate my own mind. And then I'm starting to think about them more than I am myself. And this is exactly, you know, that's exactly the scenario. So then COVID comes there. Well, actually, I saw Tom Murphy and Ricky Roosh at Ausable, and that was my initial contact right there, and that was quite an amazing one. But then I thought really nothing of it. You know, we got hit with COVID. We got locked in our houses for a year and a half, and, you know, the last thing I was thinking about was Tom Murphy and Ricky Roosh and Sweethearts and Heroes. But then, at the end of 8th grade year, I was looking at the start of my high school, and my father, who lives in the Peru district, I said I really want to go play football for Peru. So, and, you know, there was some you know, some familial prompts to go back to my father, but it was mostly to play football for Peru. It's been a long tradition in our family, way back to my great-grandfather and Tony Paparo, who's probably just a name you got, but he's like started all the sports institutions at Peru, and they're very, very accolade now. They're very good. They're very good, pretty much anything except kind of unified basketball.
No, you guys have an awesome unified basketball program. I promise.
Yeah, I didn't mean it in like a derogatory term.
Yeah.
But yeah, I forgot where I was now.
You went to Peru to play football?
Went to Peru to play football. Okay. So this is freshman year, and I was coming off of a lot of conformity and, you know, COVID, quarantine. And, you know, I was kind of, you know, I didn't know what to think. I was 13, 14, whatever. And I started to revert to my old nature. I started looking, where are the popular kids, or where could I squeeze in so I could, you know, get my name out there or whatever. And I was like, all these people, you know, some of them are good people, but I just can't really see myself, you know, forming a relationship that's so close that it would be like family, which is what I thought I had with my past friends. I was like, those friends are so good, man. I can never get friends like that. And really, it was the opposite. Initially, I had to kind of close myself off to everybody, kind of like you did with the social media, but I still had it at that time. Maybe it's junior year, I deleted like all. I still don't have nothing. So
Really?
The only thing I got is Messenger, so I can message grandma and send her my photos and my poems or whatnot. But yes, so I was started to close myself off, and, you know, I know I needed to. I know I was spread way too thin. I had to close myself off. I had to refocus for a bit. And, you know, we were in football, very physical, hard training. So I was totally immersed in that. I thought that was it. You know, I'm going to the NFL. That's what I'm gonna be doing. This is my life. You know. But then, you know, obviously I kept playing. But then I noticed that I really don't have the passion. You know, I don't have the passion for this. This isn't what I want to do for the rest of my life. This was only, you know, it was just like me pursuing tradition almost. Yeah, it brought me to Peru and it brought me these great connections and these great things. But it was really just tradition that I was just trying to hold my family tradition of playing Peru football. And I didn't think about anything. I didn't think about graduating from Peru. I didn't think, oh, these teachers are better or whatever. Like I said, there was some familial prompts, but it was pretty much football. And then so maybe 11th grade last year, I started to lose that passion. I started to lose my identity. So then I was never really since freshman year, I never really picked a clique. I was always kind of, you could definitely say I was a quiet kid, but I definitely got better each and every year, more socially capable and all these things. But I was definitely a quiet kid. And I'm kind of grateful for that. I'm grateful that I wasn't, this loudmouth kid that just wanted all the attention and wanted the accolades and wanted all the ladies or whatever. It's like, that wasn't me. I was really trying to find myself, and this is from a young age. And I feel like this is why I've made the treads that I have so far, and my personal life, and my artistic life, and what have you. It's because I closed myself off. I gave myself time, and I gave myself just the room to, think for myself, know myself better, sit with myself. And you mentioned meditation. I'm very huge on meditation, very huge. I'll go outside and I'll get some music going. The Doors are my favorite band of all time, so I'll play some Doors. I'll get some Doors playing. They're also my grandma's favorite band of all time.
It's a good band.
Oh, I love them. And I love Morrison's poetry. He's probably my biggest influence in my poetry. It's because he was all about the subconscious. He was all about not thinking about the words and just thinking about the feel. And and I really subside to that. People think too, like, literally. Like, they say this is what we have. This is what we have, and this is what this is what it is worth to me or whatever. But I really started to think of, okay, this is what we have. How did it get here? What can I do with it? All these different type of things. I'm thinking more abstract. And I feel like the immersion in my art and the rejection to conformity played a massive part in that. And Sweethearts and Heroes and leadership classes that you had mentioned, and specifically the Fish Perspective podcast. I was a host on that. It was quite fitting, and it was kind of my entry to why I'm here. We had a guest, J.D. Green, on over from Vermont, and we also had Tom Murphy that was there producing, and he was in part of our circle on the podcast. And that was when, well, actually, no, excuse me. After that, we had our own Spartan race. We had kind of put it on. We did a little fun obstacle course, whatnot, for little kids. And then Tom comes to me after, right, I was about to leave, and he would say, Tuesday, I don't even know what the date is today, but Tuesday, at 2:00, would you be free for a podcast? And I was just like, I'm down, because I really love to do this. And I mentioned to J.D. Green, the guy from Vermont. He was giving me a whole bunch of tips and a whole bunch of contacts for the podcasting. And I mentioned that I listen to Rogan all the time, almost every night. He's literally, I put a sleep timer on, and he's what I go to sleep to most of the night.
Talking about UFOs in your ear?
Yeah. Well, I'm really attracted to the artists. I'm really attracted to the artists and the naturalists, the people that stay out in Alaska for weeks, months on end. Mm-hmm. Because that used to be everybody's life. It used to be everybody's life on the front. I'm talking maybe 100, 150, 200 years ago. That was everybody's life. They were living, our great grandfathers and our great grandparents or whatever. They would, they would have physical work. They would have physical work to do. They would have to, they would have to bale the hay. They would have to shovel the manure. And this, I just talk this because, we're from Peru. I'm from Peru. And it's very much a farm town. There's definitely more corn plants than there is people. But I love it that way. I really do love it that way.
So Well, so again, I guess you said you met Tom in junior high originally, or Tom Rick.
Middle school.
Yeah. Okay. So middle
At
school.
Osable.
And then what grade for you?
10th grade.
It was 10th grade.
Yeah.
Okay. And Tom, swinging back to you, I mean, I see a lot. You guys obviously, active on social media, so I get to see it a lot. I think partly one of the things that I first caught attention on is I went to Shazy years ago, like we said, and I see you do a lot of work with Shazy. There's other schools, I see, and it seems like between Vermont and all over New York, you've hit, I feel like, hundreds of schools at this point, or maybe it feels like that, or maybe more. But what has changed over? You said 16 years you've been doing this.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So over this, I mean, again, are we close to saying hundreds of schools at this point?
Oh, at least 1,000 in
1,000?
New York State alone.
Okay, so when you take all that, how has the evolution from the early days, again, maybe what you were seeing with, the young people then to the young people now, is there any difference? Is there mostly similarities? Have you found that it's evolved? Have you learned anything that I know I'm throwing a bunch at you, you kind of pick up where you want, but anything that has really changed or opened your eyes more so than you probably ever thought in the last 16 years, or anything that jumps out to you?
Oh, man, there's a lot to say. I don't consider myself an expert in anything, but I've read everything I can get my hands on when it comes to young people, social media, from Jonathan Haidt's new book, The Anxious Generation, to Gene Twangy's book, iGen. Nicholas Carr just came out with a brand new book called The Shallows. And, I find it fascinating that, we claim to be the experts, and we go into schools and other authors come in. But none of these millennials through the Gen Xers and the last remnants of the boomers had a phone in their hand growing up. And so I stopped considering myself an expert because I read the data. I know things like social comparison. My generation, your generation, young women, they compared themselves to 3, 4, 5 women in a school and maybe a handful of magazine pictures. Mm-hmm. Haley, growing up, when she had her social media, compared herself to 500 to 1,000 women a day. Shoom, 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 shoom. When you look at the statistics on addiction and what addiction means and the way that the dopaminergic response is produced in these young people, when you see the evil that's been done to young people with these variable scheduled reward systems that we get so trapped in. I don't know if how much you know about. People use the word algorithm. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's your algorithm, but most people don't even know what that means. When you get on social media, Skinner figured this one out years ago. B.F. Skinner, the great behaviorist. You have to vary the reward schedule with mammals in order to control them. What do you mean? Well, you have a rat that pushes a bar. One time it gives a pellet. He pushes it again, it gives a pellet. He pushes it the next time, it doesn't give a pellet. Well, that's weird. It was supposed to. So he pushes it 3 times. Yep. And he gets a pellet. And he comes back the next time and he pushes it 3 times and it doesn't give a pellet. It comes out on 4 or 5 or 6. You're varying the reward schedule is what you're doing. And this is what social media does. The algorithm picks up what you like to look at. I like to look at camping and I like to look at water bottles. And so it feeds you them in a varied reward schedule. It doesn't give you what you want to see all the time. It makes you keep going because there's no bottom to this pit. And so we've known that for years, but here's like the evilness that was done. Whenever you have a device like this, there's a trigger that happens with reward scheduling. Bing! We all know that. And dopamine is secreted in anticipation of the reward, not the actual content that you look at. Bing! You get that dopaminergic hit, and that stretches back thousands and thousands of years. It's very adaptive. And then, of course, you do this, and then you get locked into this variable reward schedule. What happens, though, with this generation is then they make an investment of themselves. They put a picture. They comment on something like, oh, I like that dress, or I think that dress is ugly. All of a sudden now, someone responds to the piece of their being that they've put into this. You put an investment of yourself into this when you make a comment, when you add a picture, when you do something. You're adding a piece of you into this. That becomes the new trigger. So with a young person, what happens is, I make a comment, share a picture, or something. Now 3 people comment on my comment or on my picture. Bing! Hey, Tom commented on Haley's picture. You think a young person is not going to look at that? Mm-hmm. It's an impossible task for them not to be sucked in. Now they do it across 6 or 7 platforms, and they do it with 5 or 6 different things within that platform. So it becomes this unbelievable control on this generation. But the coolest thing, Gaelan, that I'm realizing is this generation is waking up to it. And you just heard a little bit of it. Mm-hmm. They're waking up to it. I find that the Gen Xers are the ones that have the biggest problem with it because they don't realize that the same thing is being done to them. Mm-hmm. And I get in this conversation with people all the time. I had this conversation with a guy, I've told this story a couple of times, but I had this conversation with a guy last summer, and he was looking at his phone and he kind of chuckled. He just kind of made a little, And I was like, well, what was that, And he shows me this picture of this, 5-6-year-old with a chorus can like this. You can find it on social media. And it says, Gen X, the last great generation before the sissies were born. And he looks at me, he goes, you work with young people. What do you think about this? And I almost took the bait, right? Robert Greene, he's been on Rogan a few times, talks about generational narcissism.
48 Laws of Power.
Yeah. Laws of Human Nature. He talks about... he talks about this generational narcissism. Like when I was a kid, right? Mm-hmm. You're just behind this big generational shield and you're beating this poor thing like a baby seal that can't protect themselves. Mm-hmm. And you're saying, oh, when I was a kid, right? But I looked at this guy and I said, and I almost took the bait because I want to say the same thing. This generation's all screwed up, But I looked at this guy and I think he's still mad at me today. And I pointed in his face and I said, who created him? Who created this generation? The Gen Xers are at fault here. And, one of my big things for my generation is you got to wake up. You got to understand that you screwed these kids up, these young people. And now you want to blame them for the shape that they're in. But I guess my epiphany, Gaelan, has been I'm watching with my eyes young people wake up to what was done to them. And it's a difficult struggle. They got to break some of these molds that generations had never, ever had to break before. We have no idea, you and I, what it's like to be trapped into that matrix. It's really a matrix. You have this hyper reality that they've been put in. If you saw a Tyrannosaurus Rex outside right now, you'd probably be disappointed in it because it wouldn't give you the same charge that this has given you, this device, right? Boredom is the second most suppressed emotion in human beings, and we've obliterated it in young people. We've destroyed their ability to think logically because we've allowed them to, we've entered the back door of imagination with them, and not their imagination, someone else's imagination. All of logic is built through the ear gates, right? When you were, for all of human history, a kid, a young person, an adult, they would hear something, they'd think about it in that solitude, in that silence, in their own thoughts, they would think about it. Young people don't do that anymore today, right? Because we've engrossed them in images. We've come in through the back door of imagination and we've obliterated things like boredom and creativity and imagination, which Einstein said was more important than knowledge. And so, I can spit all this stuff out that's happened to this generation, but that doesn't really do any good. It doesn't fix a single thing. It makes them feel stupid, inferior, like they're the problem, But the coolest thing for me after 16 years and a couple of million students is watching this awakening that's happening with young people. And it's happening everywhere. They're deleting their social media. You go to any of your friends, your contemporaries, and you ask them to delete their social media. See if they'll do it.
Oh, no. It's just like, that's what I'm saying. I think the older generation, because I feel like, again, I'm not in schools or anything like that, but I feel like there's a trend that I'm seeing with kind of like, you hear a lot with like Cal Newport, like digital minimalism, I think it's called. Yeah. Where you start, the whole idea of just kind of like, whether it's deleting or whether it's going on kind of a cleanse or cutting the cord on it, most people my age wouldn't. It's something that I think about quite often of, I just want to delete everything or unfollow 95% of the people that I follow. So it's like the very, very select few that I have like a really, and I remember probably 2 years ago, I went from I have like a personal and a business account. And I remember going through the business account, which I was spending more time on. And I think I went from 500 down to like 60 something follows. And they're really like either, they're people that are close to me or things that, I actually do care about versus just like, hey, I'm just going to follow anybody that I know.
Yeah.
And I found that I'm on it less. Like I'm less likely to check it because there's less popping up and there's less what's called recommendations and things like that because it's just like I don't really engage with it too much. But again, I've never gone cold turkey from it. And again, being whatever, Gen X, middle age, whatever I don't even know what I'm
You're millennial.
Millennial. I was going to say, I don't think I'm Gen X. We take like millennial, I don't think most of us would. And I think if they did, it would be hard for them to do it. One of the, maybe it's a cop-out, I always say in my head, it's like my business is very social in the sense that you need to talk to people and how they reach out to you and stuff. But in the back of my mind, I always like, could I just delete everything? But then that's always the conflicting thing where I think if I didn't have to check stuff for work, and maybe I don't have to check it, you just kind of figure out another way. But I don't know if I'd really be on it much because I don't post a lot. I used to post more again on business, but if you go to like my actual personal, it's not that often. And I think a lot of it is, and I go through moments, and I forgot which one of you said this about when it was you, when you said you took you cut off. Oh, sorry, Haley. I'm pointing at Haley for everybody can't see me. Just like you. But I'm at a stage right now where if I notice myself, on it too much, scrolling or looking or just kind of mindless. I'm like, well, why did I just spend 5 minutes scrolling through it? My default is find a book and then get engrossed in a book. So I used to read more than I do now, but I don't read full books anymore, as much, I should say. It's more of I'll pick up a book and I'll find what I'm looking for. I'll go to a chapter that I'm interested in. So I kind of scan or skim a lot of books, and I have a ton of books. So I go back and revisit books. But I find if I'm getting into a stage where it's almost like I sit myself down and say, stop doing this and let's replace it with a good habit. And my good, better habit is I try to take a book that I can, read instead. And again, I know my intention's going one way or the other, but at least the book I can focus. And I find even though it's curing a boredom, versus just sitting there, it at least allows me to be a little more calming. It has a more calming effect on me. It makes me a little more tired, which is a good thing, meaning, especially if it's at night before bed. But that's kind of my default, is to try to go into something that's a little bit more primitive than going on social media, or like I said, walk, or I like to play golf. So like going outside, doing things like that, working out, anything that I try to detach from that. And I find moments where I catch myself, and that's, it's like being that self-aware part of it, but everybody struggles with it. Like I said, and I think that's why my initial question with social media and having it follow you home is because, younger people they're very impressionable. I mean, I think everybody is, but I think it's ramped up when you're younger because you're trying to find yourself, you're trying to fit in, people are telling you different things and you don't know what to believe and not believe, and you kind of haven't, your BS detector's a little bit low at that age because you just kind of believe everybody at face value. And as you get older, at least I've found as I've gotten older, I'm more selective with who I hang out with. I'm more, I can cut stuff out a little bit more. I'm not perfect by any means, but relative to when I was, a younger age, I'm much better now. I'm more at peace with myself. Things bother me as anybody else, but I'm better at coping with it than I probably would have been 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it's a work in progress. I mean, hearing the two of you talk right now about it at your age is very cool, because I don't think I started thinking like that until probably maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah, where were you at their age?
Not thinking like that. Definitely not at Vanderbilt, I'll tell you that. I felt like I had a good group of friends. There's still buddies from high school. Not many, but there's probably I can count on one hand how many I really stay in contact with. But like I said, you're just kind of going through the motions, and you're not going to college. I went to college by default because we were told you go to college, you graduate, you go to college. I think that's one of the biggest switches that I think will be for the positive, not for the education purpose of it, even though I think there's better ways to get education. I think just financially, you are your back's up against the wall the moment you turn 18, and you have no clue what you want to do, and you're straddled with this debt, and you're straddled with basically something you're never going to be able to pay off unless they switch the system. I just think there's too much greed in that system to have it just be changed overnight. But when you end up looking at where I think is, as long as your mindset is in a good space and you have that acceptance of yourself, like that personal acceptance, and I think both of you being aware of that now, even if you're like, I have more work to do, I feel like you're always going to have work. I'm working on, I'm sure Tom, you're still working on stuff, but the fact that you're thinking about it at 18 and not at 35 or 50 or whatever, or on your deathbed, that's, I think, a huge thing.
You were going to say something.
Yeah, I've been thinking something for a while.
Just a little bit. Or if you want to push it further back. Sorry, we have a lot of people getting hot in here. So
I like it.
I want to get some air
Your
circulation.
wrestling room.
Are you okay?
Yeah, close the vents. We want to drip.
We actually, that's how we got this all soundproof. We took out all the air vents, so it gets a little toasty in here. So
yeah, I love it.
So going off of what you said, this dependency of young people on social media and the conformity of it all, and just how hard it is to really become your own person because you always know what's going on in other people's lives because of social media. It's a challenge and it's a problem, but it's not a challenge that I believe that anyone has ever seen before. And I think that is because there is no definite and there's no clear solution. Take a drug addict, for example. This is going to be a strange comparison.
Yeah.
But take somebody who's addicted to crack cocaine. What is their goal? What is the best thing that could possibly happen for them? Their best possible outcome. They're not doing crack cocaine anymore. They're not dependent on this drug anymore. They cold turkey it, or maybe that's not the method that they choose, but you know what I mean? They stop completely. They get rid of it. It's gone. It's vanished from their life, and they move on. They turn the other way, and it's no longer there. It's no longer a constant in their life. You can't do that with social media, and you're not ever going to be able to. I'm going into an engineering, AI, computer science type field. That's the future of the world. Like, there's no going backwards from that.
Yeah.
You can't just turn away from the media and turn away from technology and say, oh, well, I'm not going to do any of this because, it's not good for me. The conformity, I don't know how to be my own person with it. You can't just say no to it. You have to learn how to use it correctly, or you're going to be behind in society. And, it was important for me to take that break from the media, but at the same time, I don't believe that I would be where I'm at now if I hadn't come back and if I hadn't learned how to use it in the correct way and how to use it for better. And, Sweet Arts and Heroes posts all these different things, and I've seen a lot of good via the media, and I've learned a lot of things via TikTok. I know we talk about doom scrolling, and that is a real thing. But there's a lot of benefits if you know how to access those benefits and how to shy away from the deficits of the apps like that. And I think it is a challenge that our young people face, but it's not a challenge that can be easily grasped by people who are older and who haven't experienced it, haven't experienced having a phone in their pocket from the age of 11 onwards. You can't just get rid of it, I guess.
Can I make a point about what's happening with these two? I'd love to have a conversation about, because it's great. This awareness stuff is great. What's happening to young people, what's not happening to them, what the future looks like. We're not getting rid of these devices. All that stuff is great, and we can talk about it, and people can shake their head and say, yeah. But that's awareness. But what's the action? What steps are you taking? And, one of the biggest avenues for us is this thing called Circle. And I don't know if we talked a ton about Circle, but, Circle's probably, outside of being with my family, it's the most important place in my life. I do about 500 circles a year. And it's an ancient practice that stretches back hundreds of thousands of years of people getting together. And what they do when they get together in things like circle is they work on what James Comer called these core competencies. And he called them social and emotional core competencies. I kind of steer away from that word because I can defend the social emotional discussion with anybody from the left, from the right, it doesn't matter. But I say these are human skills. And what James Comer figured out in the 1960s is he went to these really poor schools in the New Haven, Connecticut area. He was part of Yale Medical School. And these failing schools, and he said, I think I know why they're failing. It was because of the degradation of these social and emotional core competencies, these human skills. And the number one core competency in social emotional health is self-awareness. It's being aware of how you're feeling and what's going on in the 6 inches between your ears, and probably in your heart too. But what you're listening to with Haley is the development of her own self-awareness. They say that 95% of people believe that they're self-aware, but when measured, it's less than 15%. And people like this, you're just in the room listening to people talk and you're like, does this guy hear himself? Almost no self-awareness. And I think that a lot of the work that both of these two have done with us for years has been around developing and, most importantly, making these a spaced repetitive practice, right? Repetition. It's like when you go to a math teacher and you say, hey, you only get to explain the math problem one time and then send them to take the test. We'd all say that that's ridiculous. It's a stupid concept. No. You got to practice these math problems. Well, self-awareness is no different. It's a set of circuits in the brain that you have to develop self-awareness. You have to develop self-management skills for the feelings that you're having. Responsible decision-making is a skill. Social awareness is a skill. And what we've done to this generation, this is the big harm that was done, is we put them in front of this device because we thought it was going to help them grow and learn and, develop, these technology skills. But what we were doing was we were robbing them of a very important skill that we used to get when we were in the barn with Grandpa, working on a car with our mom, baking with our dad, when we were transmitting things like self-awareness and managing the feelings that we were going in and out of as human beings. So to me, I think one of the beauties of listening to these two is, man, when I was 18, I was not thinking about my feelings and my thoughts and those kind of things. I was just doing life the way humans have always done life. But I was also raised developing all of these great human skills that this generation was largely robbed of by the Gen Xers. So it's very interesting. So I just tell people, what are you doing to help young people practice and develop these human skills? That's the question. And I think that what you'll hear from these two is that, when they get into circle on a regular basis, when they get into working with younger kids, which is a huge part of our work, they're working on those human skills that you and I got when we were locked into self-directed, self-controlled play, when we were out all day on our bicycles, right? And we just take it for granted. And, you heard Liam did that, but he did it half the rate that you and I did it.
So you guys are both lead circles?
Yes.
So you do it with elementary students or with peers same age? Or so both?
Yeah.
So again, and I remember, Tom and Heather had spoke about this last time we were here about circles and, the continent. And Heather, I think, does it with teachers also, right?
Yeah.
So have you guys ever done it with teachers, administration?
Oh, yeah.
I have.
Both?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So I just kind of speak to that. So what, again, kind of for people who have not listened or didn't listen to the last podcast, what is circles? And then what's your role in circles? And then what's the goal? What are you trying to accomplish within it?
Yeah, I'll start.
So whoever wants to go, yeah.
Yeah, I'll start. Just about like the administration and the teachers and whatnot. We're very grateful at Peru because we have an administration, specifically Mr. Barry, Mr. Matthew Barry, who is very, very encouraging about this program and is very, very close to Mr. Tom Murphy here.
I got to interrupt him about Matt Barry. This guy last year sat in 99 circles as the principal of the high school. Just sat in there and listened to young people.
Wow.
He was in a circle with people at, from my school at
Yeah.
the summit. He sat in
Yeah.
during our
Wow,
circle.
that's cool.
Yeah.
He's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that just goes to show you how a correct in a school environment, a leader, he's the leader of the school, how a correct leader in an environment can really influence the whole population. And of course, with our school leader and then our sweethearts and heroes supposed leader, Tom, it was a great renaissance of self-awareness. I totally agree with the self-awareness and how it's primal. And circle is we would all gather around the campfires, and this person was getting chased by an alligator all day, and this guy scored a big kill on a buffalo, and he's the whole tribe's eating good now. And it's like, if they were to be plagued with the presence of a phone, I feel like that wouldn't be there. Sure, they still might do their obligations, and that guy, he might have stepped in the wrong swamp or whatever, got chased by an alligator. That guy, he was in the right place at the right time, and they wouldn't be so coherent as they would, or as they were, without that. And that's why Circle is just such a great thing, because it taps into that and it trains us. Like I was grateful enough, I was gracious enough to be invited onto our Fish Perspective podcast. It was technically our Leadership 103 class. It was our curriculum, and that was formulated by a great Addie Bickowitz, who was a junior at the summit race in was it Killington?
Yeah, they had a group of students that came back from this summit where we brought 8 schools together.
Yeah.
Yep.
And these young women came back and said, we want to start our own podcast
Yep.
called The Fish Perspective.
And this is actually their photo right here. It's hard to see, but it's got cropped out. I'm the one that took that photo right there.
This one down here?
This is Addie Bickowitz. She came up with the idea, and that's Kenzie Whitmarsh, Zoe Malcolm, and Skylar Smart.
What school?
Peru.
Oh,
Yep.
Peru. Okay.
I was just on my first episode of it last week.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
they've been doing it all year. And man, I felt like I was the weak link.
Yeah.
But we have about 13 students sit in this circle, and man, the questions they asked about trust and loyalty.
Yep.
Did the podcast record the circle?
Yeah.
I want to check this out.
Yeah, John Mitchell.
Yep.
Their tech guy.
Okay.
He sets up like 4 cameras,
It's
mics.
great.
It's
great.
crazy
That's cool.
what they've
Where
done.
can we find that?
Spotify.
Yeah,
and
Spotify.
YouTube,
And
I believe.
it's called, what's the name?
The Fish Perspective
yeah.
podcast.
Like FISH?
yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
not like the band Fish.
No.
The Fish
Or
Perspective.
the Guy Fish.
And there's a reason it's called The Fish Perspective.
Yeah, it's an acronym.
Yeah.
It's like
Okay.
foraging, inspiration. I
So
don't know,
capital FISH?
Yeah.
Gotcha,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But we did an episode last week, and it was my first time because I'm in school every day, so they got a chance to get to Peru, and it was intense. I mean, some of they had about 6 or 7 students had never been on it, and man, they brought it. These young, especially the young women, they just brought it, and I was like, whoa, I feel like the weak link in this circle.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say, they brought it because they sensed that it was already there. Especially amongst their hosts, and especially having you there and another established podcaster, JD Green from Aired Out, they felt like they had to. And I feel like that's a great environment that we need to transmit amongst the whole school, and not just one specific room in this in this circle. If we could get that essence of awareness and coherency amongst the whole school, which we already have made great strides towards. That's the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah, Liam, your school. The coolest thing about Peru, and Peru's not a small school. I mean, Thai's a pretty small school.
Yeah.
But Peru's got 130, 140 students per grade.
In our class.
And they do circle with almost every student, in the high school.
Mm-hmm.
They now have high schoolers that are doing circle with younger students and running the show.
Yeah, we've got many avenues, and we've got many things that allow us to do that. In our 101 class, I'm a 102 this year. In our 101 class last year, we made multiple trips, I think 3 or 4, over to the elementary school, which is on the same campus. And we would sit down in the same essence, the same format, the same guidelines, but just with little kids. And it was, and we would do bully drills with them, and we would have games, activators all set, and then we would all sit in a circle. And to me, that's always been the best part, because I'm very much a listener. I like to listen to what everybody has to say and all the lessons that they could give me. And I learned so much. I learned so much from those kids. But I also am a very forgetful person. I'm also a very, very forgetful person, and anybody in my family will attest to that. So I don't remember specifically what the kids were talking about, but I remember just sitting there. I was facilitating with one other person, and it was just such an incredible circle. And I said throughout our fish perspective time, I said every episode has just gotten better and better and better. It's because we're establishing that environment, and we're transmitting it not only through our school, the high school. We're also letting it trickle down to the elementary too, and also the middle school. They have their own version of leadership class, which is called the Braves Junior class, and they're taught by Miss Yakstek, who's the big name at our school for the positive school environment team, and the school board, and I don't think school board, but like the student council and all these things. She's a very wonderful woman, and she teaches them the exact principles. It's literally just leadership class, but for middle school students. And we had them in for maybe a month straight. We would go into leadership class, and usually it's every other day leadership class. And
and this is our class, Gaelan,
Yes.
that we designed,
Yep.
and the full curriculum too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll come back to the class.
Yeah.
I want to hear the breakdown. So, okay, yeah, I'll let you finish up, and then we'll go here, ask you, then we'll come back to the 101 class.
Sure.
Cool.
For certain.
Okay.
Sounds good. Like we would have these middle school students, and sometimes they get stigmatized for being obnoxious, or
The same thing you were at your age.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unforgiving or whatever have you. But they also have these tremendous positive attributes too that I wouldn't even have thought. I have a little cousin that, well, he's going into 9th grade now, but he was an 8th grader. And I wouldn't even, he's a phenomenal kid, but sometimes he could be a little reckless at home a little bit. But he's a great kid. But at school, he's phenomenal, and I could see why. Because he's got this great environment to go to. Of course, you're going to have some outcasts, and you're going to have some people that, will like to get in trouble or whatever. They like to bring attention to themselves. But talking to all these middle school students in this circle, it's really enlightening. And then you really think that, wow, these people, or these younger people, are starting to think more like we are. And that's because we're formulating this environment. And we're formulating the reversion back to our self-awareness and our primal instinct to be with each other. I mean, humans are very much a social animal.
So So Haley, I want to kick it over to you. So kind of building off what Liam, what is the? So again, just like circle itself, how's it set up? How many people typically? What's the format? Like if you're leading this, what questions are you asking? What conversations typically pop up? Are you guiding it? Or are you just kind of reacting? Like how does, like, put yourself in circle right now and just pretend you're giving us kind of a
rundown.
You're describing it as
Okay.
you're seeing it through your eyes.
Okay. Circle at my school, it's about 10 to 20 people usually.
Yep.
That can vary. You can have huge circles if you want that. You can have very small ones if you want that. They can be used for different purposes, I believe. A smaller circle is more intimate. You get usually longer, more emotional responses, whereas in a bigger circle, the responses might be shorter, but you have a wider array of responses that you can listen to. So it kind of depends. It depends on how many kids want to show up for that specific period. There's no rule to it. It's just whoever wants to do it can do it. In high school, and honestly, in all of the circles I've led throughout all of the different grades, we start with an activator. We start with a game to get everybody moving. And I always do the original "Will You Be My Sweetheart?"
That is the best one.
Okay, it's my favorite
It's the
one.
best one.
Yeah, I do that every single time. So we do that. read the room. When everybody's getting tired of it, when it's getting repetitive, you say, okay, do we want to stop? Do we want to play a different game? If they want to play a different game, we do that. If they don't,
Why a game first? Why activation?
to get I think it's to get everybody moving and
Okay.
and also I've learned with the Will You Be My Sweetheart Hero game, it gets everybody to move around. So
Can you explain what that game is?
yeah, so everybody stands up in a circle. There are chairs. Or do you stand up or do you sit?
No, you sit first.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay. We've
Yeah.
played it both ways.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
can be messy. Okay, so you do sit down in a circle, but there's one person in the middle. So there's one person who isn't going to have a seat. That person says, "Will you be my sweetheart?"
Only if.
So everybody else in the circle says only if. And then they can say anything from if you're wearing a blue shirt to, you know,
You ever peed in a swimming pool?
yeah. It can be
Okay.
like a tangible,
It gets
visible thing.
outrageous.
Or
So
it can
the
be something
person
like
in the
that.
middle says this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then if that, you know, characteristic or quality, like if the person says if you have a blue shirt and, you know, you're sitting in the circle and you have a blue shirt on, you have to get up and find a different seat and switch with somebody else who also had to stand up and who also had the blue shirt on.
Gotcha.
So not everybody, but generally a lot of people have to stand up and typically run to find another chair.
It
Also,
turns
like
into
musical
it
chairs.
turns into a contact sport.
Yeah,
Okay.
it does. It's a sport at our school.
Yeah.
People go
So
flying.
multiple people are moving at the same time.
Yeah.
because
Oh,
of the
yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
So
They're
it's-
hitting
okay.
each other. They're fighting
Yeah.
over chairs. Chairs go flying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially with the middle schoolers, they take it very, very seriously. But it's fun, and you know, especially with the middle school age group, they don't want to do it right off the bat. They don't want to talk. They don't want to share their own perspectives because, like we were just talking, they're worried about the people around them. But when they play this game, that all goes away. You know, that's gone. They're focused on the game now. The game was fun. When the game's over, they're more likely to open up a little bit more from what
I'm
I've
going to
gathered.
ping pong with her. I'm not going to steal this from her, but she's saying all the right stuff.
Mhm.
But the science behind it,
Mm-hmm.
the number one brain rule for all time for learning. This comes from John Medina, one of the great molecular biologists of our times. He's got a great book called The 12 Brain Rules for Learning. The number one brain rule of all time for learning is motion.
Mm.
It sounds kind of weird, but I had to memorize this because this was my story as a kid. I couldn't sit still. I was not a popular young person in school because I wasn't mean or hurtful. I just couldn't sit still. I had to memorize this. It meant so much to me. He says the brain was designed to learn an ever-changing, unstable outdoor environment in nearly constant motion. That's how the brain was designed to learn. And in compulsory education, what do? We sit kids down and we preach at them in a non-moving environment, which is like the worst thing you can do for education, and that's what we do. So when we start Circle, a lot of people like to keep the fun to the end in education. If you boys and girls are good, we'll do something fun at the end. But I say taking fun out of education is called abuse. Kids like to have fun. That's how they learn best, and that's how you learn best. And I can give you the science on that as well if you want. When it comes to how many repetitions it takes to build a synapse in the human brain. But when you add play and fun, you can dramatically reduce the number of repetitions. But what Haley's talking about is when you get kids that walk in the room and there's a circle of chairs and they're like, is this therapy? I don't want to do this.
Is this group therapy?
Right, they
I've
cross
gotten
their
that so many
arms.
times.
Right, they cross their arms. They don't want to do it. I'm like, no, we're going to have some sick fun here. Because your motion creates your emotion. We know this. And they say motion is the elixir of anxiety, right? You put yourself into motion, you don't feel good, and things just feel better.
Yeah.
So we always started with motion first, because if you can make yourself physically vulnerable from here to here, it's easier to make yourself emotionally vulnerable. So Circle always begins with motion. I will never, I did circles at Camp Pendleton. I just did them last week with linemen, guys working on high voltage power lines. I played Will You Be My Sweetheart with 20 men with big hairy beards. It got so inappropriate. I was uncomfortable. I was like, let's play a different one, guys. So go ahead, Haley. So motion first.
Yes.
And you did. I loved how you articulated it. You got
Yes.
all the good points.
Yeah, motion first. And honestly, we usually do many different games, so many different forms of motion, because that's what they like. They want to have fun, and then they get tired generally. And so we all sit down. Somebody pulls up an extra chair for that person in the middle, and when we have multiple older students in the circle with the younger people, we space the older people out, and that makes from what I've found, I've done a lot of circles, it makes the younger students more likely to respond when there hasn't been a train of their friends who have passed the talking piece and who haven't answered. Because like we said, conformity. If the 3 people before them haven't answered the question, they're not going to be likely to answer. Yeah. So we try to break that up. We try to stop that, but we try to be proactive and prevent it before it can even occur. And
that's my favorite reason to play Will You Be My Sweetheart, because when I end the game, I pull my chair next to the student that I've connected with. It's a little trick of the trade. And if I know Liam likes me and he thinks Tom is awesome and cool, and we talked about something before the circle starts, I pull my chair next to him. Because I know if he's a gatekeeper, if he's an influencer, if he answers, the dominoes are just going to fall.
Yeah.
That's neat when you see somebody understand that.
Yeah, and it's very true. I've seen it happen multiple times. So we're all sitting down. We go over the guidelines of circle. There are 4 guidelines, not rules, and we always are very clear. We iterate that over and over again. Circle isn't about rules. It's not supposed to be like school. It's not supposed to be like following 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it's a free space. But the guidelines are there to keep.
Why guidelines?
Why guidelines and not rules, or just why guidelines?
Why do you have guidelines?
To keep things from turning into complete chaos.
A little bit of structure. Yeah.
A little bit of structure. And I don't know if there's a specific order, but there's 4 guidelines. Number 1, don't talk if you don't have the talking piece. So there's always a talking piece. And if you have the talking piece, say whatever you'd like.
It's like a talking stick?
It could be
or whatever that form of object is?
It could be that pen. It could be your cup. It could be your watch. It could be literally anything.
Okay.
And we've had some very strange objects.
And it makes it more fun, I'm assuming, depending on what you grab or... Okay.
Exactly, yes. So number 1, don't talk if you don't have the talking piece. Number 2, the talking piece gets passed in one direction and one direction only. So if I pass it to you, you pass it to him. He can't pass it back to you. You can't like reverse the direction.
You got to go through the whole crowd to get
everybody.
back. Yep.
Yes, and I don't know the specific reasons for this. I just know what I've picked up on myself. It doesn't prohibit. It prevents casual conversations from happening. It forces people to listen a little bit more, and before they can just speak, and before they can, they say something, their friend says something, and they're like, oh, wait, I want to add on to that. They have to be patient. They have to learn the skill of patience, wait for everybody else to respond. And then, maybe in that time period of the talking piece getting past to everybody else, they think of something new to say, or they think of a new thing to add on to what they were going to say.
Would it also be the responses are more thought out? Because they can't. It's like if it gets to you and you're like, "This is my only only chance."
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. It forces you to think of a response and not just be automatic with it.
Like, don't waste your words.
Exactly.
Make them count.
Be particular with your words. It's like I feel like with word counts on essays, it's hard to say everything you want to say in a certain amount of words. It's very easy to word vomit and to just ramble. And
was it Thomas Jefferson that said I would have wrote a shorter letter, but I didn't have time? Was that who it was?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was.
It's
harder to...
It is. And I know it with myself. It takes a lot of thinking and a lot of effort to cut things down and to be more concise with your words and to be more efficient. It's a valuable skill to learn. And you learn it in circle, and you practice it in circle. So that's guideline number 2. I don't know if you want to add on to that anymore.
Well, I would just say, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna. Well, I want to hear all.
I'll go on. I'll say something
because I have some questions I want to ask.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So just
keep going.
3.
Roll 3. Yep.
Okay. I said don't talk. Okay. Number 3.
Guideline, not rule.
Guideline number 3. If you don't want to speak, you don't have to. If you want to pass the talking piece, you are able to. And this. Sometimes I don't like this guideline, I'm not going to lie. However, it does give kids the ability to sit there and listen and not have to worry about formulating a response if they're not there yet. You know, if it's their first circle, if they're new to it and they're anxious and they're stressed out and they don't know what to say, they're worried about what their friends are going to think of their responses. It completely eliminates that. And although we do want these kids to be able to respond at some point and to be able to formulate their own responses on their own, it takes time. It takes practice. You have to do it over and over again. So right in the beginning, it completely eliminates the stress of having to formulate a response, and it allows the kids to just listen and to pick up on what other people are saying and to hear different perspectives. And I think that's very, very important, especially for young people. So that's number 3. And then number 4, guideline number 4. What stays in, or what is said in circle stays in circle. Is that correct?
So Vegas.
I say that every
Okay.
single time.
Yeah.
I say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And this is to establish some sort of trust among the
Confidentiality,
people
yeah.
in the circle. And unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. I would love to say that it works 100% of the time. However, that doesn't always happen, especially right in the beginning. But once again, as you practice and as you keep doing it with these kids over and over and over again, I believe that 4th guideline, like, it does get better. The kids stop talking about what's happening in the circle outside of the circle, because I think they start to realize, you know, this super, super quiet kid who just spoke for the first time in 3 months, like, let's not make fun of him anymore. Let's listen to what he has to say. Let's keep it in circle, and let's move on. So those are.
I was going to say, that's a good life skill. Something I've noticed as I've gotten older. You realize who you can tell stuff to and not tell stuff to, and then that someone that does not share something, to me, becomes more of a valuable friend. But someone, like I said, it makes a difference. And you typically, I mean, there's a few friends I have that I know if I said something, it's staying between us, and vice versa. And that's someone I try not to be a gossiper. I try not to be someone that goes and, you know, if Tom tells me something, I'm like, I mean, I kind of joke, my memory's pretty bad, so it would be, I probably forget what he told me, but I wouldn't ever go around and say, oh, Tom said this thing, especially, I mean, I always kind of look at, I have like one rule in my life, and it's the golden rule. It's like, just treat others away. Like, I think if we just looked at every situation and said, how would I want to be treated if I was opposite? I think that would cause most problems to go away, because I think, you know, naturally we want good things to happen to us, so I always try to reflect that on other people. Okay, so 4 guidelines. I love them. Keep going.
So 4 guidelines done in the beginning of the school year. We would go over them very in depth and in detail. As we kept doing the circles, we go through it. Every circle, we say them, but we don't go through it as in depth anymore, because the kids have practiced it. They understand it more and more as time goes on. So we get through those, and then we start the circle. I always start with Tom's famous question, who's your favorite superhero? And it's a lighthearted question. It can be a lighthearted question. It can be a heavier question.
And this goes right along. Everybody goes through and answers the question. It comes back. So I should say circle. You guys all sit in a circle.
We all sit in a
Okay,
circle. Yes,
so just
sorry.
Nothing in between, no table either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just you're
chairs.
vulnerable. You're sitting across from people in a big. Yep.
Just like a campfire. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
With no campfire.
With no fire.
Okay.
Yeah. So we do that. I always ask that question first, because the kid next to me can say Spider-Man with absolutely no explanation if they want to. And, you know, maybe their friend says that, but then maybe if you have another older student in that circle with you, they can throw something different in there and say, oh, my superhero is my dad, because he has taught me how to be strong during hard times, or something like that. Something that's not the classic, you know, Spider-Man, Batman, typical
Like a
response.
literal superhero.
Not a literal superhero, more of an actual person. And I think I've seen it happen so many times where the kids are just like, oh, it just hits them like, oh, that question can have lots of different responses. And that is what you want in circle. You want the kids to be able to understand that the questions can be interpreted however they want them to be. You can respond to the question however you would like to. There's no rules. There's no strict things that you need to follow. Everything is kind of open to interpretation, and that's why I like that question so much, because it helps the kids
No, I think
realize
it's.
that.
I mean, my natural was actual superhero, which I
Yeah.
would have said Spider-Man.
Yeah,
just because that was who I
everybody-
watched as a kid. That was my favorite show as a kid.
Everybody
Like,
says Spider-Man first.
I think he's the coolest. But
He's the goat. He's the goat.
Yeah.
I think so. Which
You know
is,
why?
Which is funny.
Took me a long time to figure this out.
Why is it the oldest? Is he the oldest superhero?
No, I mean for young people, why did the majority of them pick Spider-Man?
Is it
Because
because
he's
Peter
the
Parker was
youngest.
kind of the nerdy kid and then became
He's a
this-
kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a
Yeah.
kid.
He's a
It's
kid.
easy to identify with him.
Mhm.
Well, I always
tell-
feel like Peter Parker was the kind of the nerdy kid that people picked on, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
became the super. Got bit and became
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
like the origin story of
But I
like
tell- I
Liam's
tell-
origin story, but yeah, the Spider-Man origin
I
story.
tell adults to be careful, though. I said all those older superheroes didn't take him very seriously, Spider-Man.
Mhm.
But you know what his name is?
Which one? Peter Parker?
No, his real name.
Spider-Man's real name?
Yeah,
No.
the Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh yeah.
And what I've learned after all these years, and I got that question from in my second circle ever, probably 8 or 9 years ago. A friend of mine asked me to go to this circle thing. He said, "Hey man, I need you. You're going to be at this school. They do this restorative circle stuff, and need you to go." And I was like, I walk in. I'm like, "Oh, is this therapy?" That's what I was thinking. I sat down, and right out of the gate, this was my second circle ever. The kid says, "Who's your favorite superhero?" And he passed, and I'm like, "This is stupid. Spider-Man, Batman." Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't know what's happening here. And so I left, and circle was over, and I called my buddy, and I'm like, this was terrible. Like, they just talked about comic book people, which, the kids liked it. They enjoyed being there. About a week later, the guy calls me and says, you got to do your own circle. And I'm like, okay. And so I get there completely unprepared, and I panic. And so I just asked the same question. I was like, who's your favorite superhero? And I passed it, and it was Batman, Spider-Man. And then this kid was like, my grandma. And I could hear a tremble in his voice, and I was like, whoa, what's that all about? And that caused this chain reaction. So the kid was like, my grandfather. And then this other kid gets choked up talking about his mom. And I was like, man, I'm onto something here. And so I started to play with that question a lot. And what I realized is that question, and I tell adults this all the time, I said, that's one of the oldest questions on planet Earth. Because it's one of the great archetypes that Carl Jung talked about. We all go on this hero's journey. But we all have had people in our lives that we consider heroes. And so when I reframe the question to students and I say, who's your favorite superhero? They smile at first, and I say, well, you might have thought about when you were a kid, you used to wear those silly costumes. I'm giving you the intention of the question right now, which is very important when you really learn how to do circle. And I say, you probably thought about when you used to wear those silly costumes, or maybe you got a little brother, a little sister, they still wear those costumes, and you come home and they're outside fighting a tree or jumping off a picnic table trying to fly like a weirdo, and you just laugh because you forgot. You left Wonderland, right? That state of wonder's gone now, and you're trying to become an adult. But you don't realize what little kids are doing when they put those costumes on. My own son was serious when he put those things on. He wasn't joking around. But you know what he was doing, Gaelan? He was practicing being brave. And you don't think about it like that, but Socrates said that courage was the greatest of all the virtues. Like, you can't do anything else without it. If you have your own children, all you want them to do is to be able to order their own slice of pizza, stick up for themselves, go on a job interview someday, but that takes courage. And that's what little kids do, because no one's ever born brave. It's a virtue that has to be practiced, and that's what little kids do. But then you get older and you got to put those silly costumes away, and I hope all of you in this room have met some real heroes in your life. Maybe like my friend Rick, who they just saw present. Maybe a mom or a dad that grew up real poor and just gave you a better life. Maybe a brother or sister that had to overcome something difficult. Maybe a grandparent that got sick and fought for a long time and you're just proud of them. Anyway, who's your favorite superhero, Gaelan? Maybe you could tell us about that person.
I mean, my initial thought, I don't have like one person that sticks out, but I think it always goes back to people that take care of others. Like I always think that, it could be. You go to like the medical, you go to like first responders, you could go to
but where'd
a teacher.
you get some of your virtues from?
What was that?
Where'd you get some of your virtues from? One of your greatest virtues. Who gave that to you?
I mean, naturally you think parents, or you
Who?
think, I gave it to myself.
No, who? Which parent was it? You're skating a little bit around this issue. Why?
Just in general.
Yeah, who's one of your great heroes, man, that changed the trajectory of your life?
I don't know. It's tough. I mean, like I said, I would think my parents. I don't know. It's.
Well, pick one.
You can go, mom.
All right, why? What did she give you?
I don't know. It's tough. I mean, it's. I think I think from both parents, I got both my parents aren't, I'm going to call it like flashy people. They're both pretty like humble, like easygoing people. So I think one of the characteristics that I've tried to exemplify, like I said before, kind of the golden rule of like trying to, I think one of the things I don't like about people, and I try not to ever do myself, is think I'm better than anybody else for any reason. I think one of the things I've gotten from my parents, we grew up very modest, and I think one of the things that I think that's carried with me into things where I feel like no matter what I've accomplished or not accomplished, I don't feel like I've ever risen up to a point where like I'm like, hey, I'm better than Liam for any reason, or I'm better than Tom for any reason, or even if I've done something that I know is, well, I did that and they didn't do it. In my head, I'm like, that's always go back to like, that's one particular thing, not like we all have different strengths. So I always feel like even though I might be good in one thing, I'm deficient in another thing. So I just never try to put myself where I think I'm above anybody else, because I just feel like a lot of us, kind of back to that empathy or just treating people equally. I think that's always something that I've tried to do. And I feel like, work ethic, whatever you want to call it, I think I've always been, I read this thing recently. It was a famous person back in the day, and they were talking about how well he was an actor and how well he treated like the people on the stage and the behind the scenes people you'd never hear their name. They were just kind of, second tier on the sets. And he really kind of dropped down to their level regarding picking stuff up or moving stuff or helping out, or, hey, you guys been working all day and haven't ate. Like, let me just get some food and basically, pay to have them get food. So I feel like something like that where, I don't know. I feel like that's something I probably got from my parents, of just like I'm like apt to pick, or I'm more likely to just dive into something that, even though they're like, oh, you're this person, why are you doing that job, or why are you doing this? And I just feel like I'm never above anything. I mean, sometimes I have to remind myself, like, don't do that, because it's probably not the best use of your time, but I don't look at it as like a belittling, or it's like if you looked at a janitor, and I think this actually was from your book, right? 13 Pillows? Yeah. Was it the janitor?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember, there's a gym teacher and janitor. So I think the idea with like the janitor, people that do certain jobs, and you think it's like a demeaning job, or, hey, it's a belittling job. And then I look at it, it's like, I think everybody has a role. So then I think one of the things I've gotten from, and I think my parents are both good at, is they're very like humble, but they've always treated people well. Like I don't think they've ever looked down on anybody. They never talked, nobody talked shit at my house about other people. I think it was just, and that's something I try to instill in my kids too. Like if I hear they're not being nice, it's like, oh, no, we don't do that. Like we're not, like we don't talk bad about, you don't want them talking about you that way. Like we just don't do it. So I think that's probably one, I would probably say that. I don't know if that's really like the top thing in my life, but I feel like if I go back to maybe one of the core values that I've never really listed out core values myself, but that'd probably be one of them, is really just treating people the way you'd want to be treated, and not, like, I could just go back to life. I don't know. I mean, you guys are, you've experienced this in your own lives at this point, and you'll continue. But one thing as I've gotten older, just realizing life's hard, like for everybody, and everybody's battling their own version of hard. Yeah. And I think one of the, kind of the idea of going back to a circle, if everybody was to throw their problems in a circle, you'd be quick to pull yours back out, because you don't know what people are going through. And I think that's something that has kept me more, maybe self-aware, but also more empathetic to others, where it's like, hey, things are hard. And you see people that treat people badly, you see, and especially, in my, being in a profession or being in like a business setting, I've seen people not give the time of day to others because they think they're above someone. And I just have never done that. And I've always, I've really tried to, whether it's the front desk person or the CEO or the janitor, or even just the random person dropping off something, it's like, they're all people. They're all doing their own thing. And some people don't choose to do certain jobs. And I think that's something where if you put your emphasis on being a professional or someone who's very famous or any of these things, like a lot of people choose not to do that. And they're back to self-awareness. I feel if you are content with what you want to do. And again, I don't know what your goal is, but like I said, not going to college and kind of following, you said following, or Tom said in the beginning, following, or Liam following his heart. I want to use names, so I'm just not saying you and for real, I can't say. But following your heart, like you're looking at it like, hey, you may not become the most famous person or the richest person or whatever, but if it makes you satisfied and happy, I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. But I think a lot of that has to do with being empathetic to other people, realizing that your journey is different than mine, but we can all help each other on that journey or be a lifeline for that person. I think it goes back to what Tom said about being tribal, being like, having this idea of, hey, I'm going to share my supplies with you in the hope that you share them with me, or I got your back, but hopefully you have my back down the road. And we kind of use this social currency more as a survival mechanism. Obviously now it's maybe more flashy with the haves and have-nots and who has money and who, but I think ultimately what it comes down to is, trying to, be there for others. And I said this on the last podcast, most people have goals. Like everybody takes their goals, but an unhealthy person has one goal in life, and that's to get healthy. So it really just simplifies your view down. And something I'm repeating a couple things I've said recently, so if people have heard this before, I apologize. But one of the things I look at every single day is if I'm healthy and happy, and my kids are healthy and happy, then I'm good. Meaning there's other stuff. There's stresses. I have stress in my life. You guys all have stress in your life. I think anybody we meet has stress in our life. But I put in perspective of, if I go home tonight and my 3 kids and my wife are happy to see me, then I'm like, anything that I did when I left the door today, either if I thought it was good or bad, if I come home and I have 3 kids yelling, hey dad, I want to show you this, hey dad, like big hug, or me and my wife get to chat and hang out at night, like it's tough, but then that's something that's a constant reminder in my life to, you're good, you got a really good life. And it's kind of, I think it goes back to, you guys might be, maybe you haven't seen it. It's a black and white movie, so maybe not super cool, but It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Christmas movie.
Dude,
It's
Wonderful Life.
It's like
My dad's favorite
anytime a
movie.
bell rings, an angel gets its wings. You ever heard? So if not, watch it. It's a really.
Oh, it's a classic.
Yeah.
But basically, the whole story behind it is that this main character, George Bailey, basically thinks that he's useless, nobody loves him, and then he gets an angel. Clarence comes down and basically shows him, here's the world without you in it. And then I won't tell every scene, but basically he realizes that he's got a pretty damn good life, and that it's just a matter of putting in perspective of your business is failing, all this stuff, but the people love you, your family loves you, your brother loves you, your parents love you. They kind of go through almost like the butterfly effect of if he wasn't there, what would life be like? And life was actually worse without him there. So I think that's something that, I try to put in perspective. So I don't know where I get those attributes, and some of it's even, I'm sure I've read. Sometimes it's osmosis, listening. Last time I had you on, I learned stuff from just hearing you and Heather talk. I was like, and even hearing you guys at a younger age, it puts it more in perspective of I didn't know that angle, and my kids are younger, and I've been, I haven't been around high school kids I used to coach, but that was many years ago. So, I try to learn from everybody. So even hearing you guys, I'm not looking at it they're 18 and I'm twice their age and I know more than they do. I'm like, no, kind of what Tom said. I'm not an expert, by any means. I'm not even really good at the technology. I think Loudon's got more knowledge on this than I do too. So get some tips from him. But I think, ultimately it's just kind of being open to learning and realizing that you're not the smartest person and trying to, I don't know. So I think there's a lot there. But I guess hero-wise, I think parents, I've had great coaches. I've had great teachers. Actually, one of my teachers, she liked that right there. Catherine Brown, she was my...
oh, shoot. She's a rock star.
And she goes back, God, many, many years ago. But one of my favorite classes ever that I ever took was if she's listens, hi, Mrs. Brown, you're great. But AP Lit is what I took. Was the hardest class I ever took.
Huh.
And I struggled. It was a struggle. And I remember reading my first paper, and she graded on a scale of 1 to 9. And I've never seen more markups on a paper. And I think I got a 2 maybe. Yeah. And I did all I could. I never got a 9 in the class. And I remember I got 1 8. But it goes back to you bust your tail to get this 8, and it was that much sweeter to get it. And I don't, like I said, she didn't give. I think a few kids got 9s the entire year. It was tough. And I didn't even pass the course, the college credit. But it was just it was hard, and that challenged me, and I liked the challenge. So I'd go back to, someone like that. I had some teachers. or coaches that are actually, I think they're both in administration now, but just good mentors back when I was a kid, kind of those young ages where you're in a position where like you need a little bit of like strong, like I always responded to strong leadership. Like, I think it was difficult. There were the people you were kind of scared of in the back of your mind, but you knew like you loved them, but you were also scared of them. I had but it wasn't, you weren't scared of them because you hated them. You're scared of them because they're going to push you out of your comfort zone or make you work hard. And I think, Tom, you probably have that effect on a lot of students when they see you come in and, I don't know if I'm sure you go through your background, but you had a background where you beat people up, and
competed in a sport that I love.
Yeah. But then
we call that beating people up.
And then, yeah. And I'm sure you had you're probably on the receiving end of a few hits, but and then you take someone like Rick, who like you talk about hero. Then I go to people like that in the military, especially people that were affected. Obviously, there's physical things that were affected to them, but I think anybody that goes to any type of combat, there's more mental, I think, than ever physical, or definitely more people that PTSD or whatever, what have you, but. When you look at people like that, like, I don't know if I could do that, and then you look at something where you might think you have everything going on, and I look at someone like Rick who enlists and goes in and obviously is on the front lines, and life's changed dramatically, and what he's done or is able to do now and have such an impact. You look at that and like, I don't know if I could do that. Meaning, I don't know if I'm as, you take words from you guys, brave as someone like Rick, and that I don't know if I'd get into a ring either and get in a scrap with somebody, but you look at that and then you start putting in perspective of, and I think you guys obviously know Rick. I've never met Rick. I'd love to, but I'm just saying in general, you guys probably see that too. That's like, you look at those people and you're like, the real life superheroes are the ones that, I don't know. I mean, I'm ranting a lot here, but I'm just saying, I think overall you find them in just everyday life, just people that stick out that, you don't know where you're going to find it. Like, I watch from a distance. I'm not, in the circles or at the events, but even just watching what, you guys do and taking that away. And I think one of the things, especially now that I have kids, you put it more in perspective. Like I saw the Spartan races and you just see the joy on kids' faces, or the video that, Thomas, you're good at sending me some stuff, videos here and there. And I watch all of them. And it was the one when you guys were in Killington and just like, kids hiking up and just like talking like, I can do this. Like, and I guarantee you, probably at the start, they're intimidated by going up Killington, which was at the Spartan. It was the same thing as the Spartan race, right?
Yeah, it was the same course.
Yeah, and that's the beast too. That's not like that's not like a little fun run. That's a legit thing. So when you see kids that kind of take this, they don't think they can do it, and next thing you know, probably in the matter of hours or even days, that all of a sudden they blow their expectations out of the water, and like, I didn't think I could ever do that. And it's like, you have it in you. And I mean, this is anybody. I mean, this is a reminder to myself. Like, you can do anything you want. It's just, you got to believe it, and you got to, put the effort in and put the actions in. But I think heroes. I don't know if I can pinpoint any specific. I think if I sat here and thought different scenarios, different people that I was around, I'd be like, they would fit for this reason or that reason. I think parents. I think grandparents. I think anybody. I look at my wife. Obviously I have a first-hand account or a very direct account. I was hoping you
were going to throw her in this group.
Yeah, and like, but you see, I mean, just, stuff that she went through with, childbirth is no joke. Like, being a mother is no joke. So, I mean, when you start looking at that stuff and then you start looking, and I think at times too, I mean, not to sound egotistical, but you have to look at yourself too if there's something that you did well that you have to be proud of. Where, there's certain things in my life where I'm like, that was definitely a win. Like, you definitely, even though it might not have been a sexy thing at the time, it was something where it might have exceeded my expectations, or maybe I felt like I could feel myself growing, or I was in an uncomfortable situation and I came out of it unscathed a little bit and learning. I'm like, that was good. And I think kind of being self-aware of knowing like, wow, I struggled with that one, but like, because you can't cheat yourself, you know yourself. So if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, or you cut corners, like, you live with that. And I think that's something I've always taken, anytime I feel like I'm cutting corners, it's like, you weren't your optimal self. But
you see how that question, though,
just went into a 30-minute rant.
Well, what's neat about Circle is now when you have a group of students and there's 15 or 16 students in this circle, or people, I should say, they're all going to have a different answer for that question. And what I like to say about Circle is it never really changes my perspective, but it reorients my perspective. Mm-hmm. And what you do is, I almost think of it as like a a ghost, like if I could just take my spirit or my soul out and just sit on top of Liam, and it just inhabits him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens. We were sitting here and we were trying to inhabit your perspective as we were sitting here listening. And she was thinking about 10 different things on everything that you said. And he was thinking
So was I.
10 different
Yeah.
things. And so what happens is the emotional intelligence of the group goes up collectively. And the greatest businesses in the world have just figured that out, that when human beings play with ideas together, everyone wins. When you have a secure environment and people feel like what they're saying isn't going to be judged, it's going to contribute to the whole and to the success of the team. And that's just one of the great powers of Circle. I got another great question. You can give me a 30-minute rant on this one.
I'll go quick because I know we're short for time.
Yeah,
here.
well, I'm not going to worry about the time. We can go. I'll just text my guy and say I hate to just run out on. But I had a kid, and 99% of the questions, and I got about 200 of them I've collected over the years, come from students. I get none from teachers. They give terrible questions. I like saying that in a circle when there's a bunch of teachers in there, and they're like, "What do you mean?"
I've noticed that.
And I say, hold on a minute. I took a lot of tests. They were terrible, those questions. And but most of them come from students, you know. And I that superhero one came in my second circle ever, but I got one a couple years ago, and a kid said, "What would the world be like if you never existed? You personally.
Mm-hmm.
What would that world be like if you never existed?" You got to take into consideration your brother and your sister and that relationship, your parents and the difficulties you put them through and the joy that you put them through and your friends and the tragedy of life and, you know, the, yeah, you said something to that effect. And as I was sitting here thinking about that, I'm thinking about your own children wouldn't exist.
Yeah. When you said it, the first thing in my mind was that.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. That instantly went to my 3 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's like I said, if you go all the way back, I mean, I think, you know, my initial thought is 3 kids, and then you start playing it back, and I kind of go over all the little nuances, like not necessarily friends and things like that, but my initial thought is my kids, and then I would rob my parents of a child, like experience with that child. And I think obviously you can fill, I'm not going to make this 30 minutes. It's just like you can fill in the gap between the two, but my natural tendency is to go to those two extremes.
Yeah. Your relationship with your parents and your kids is important.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's like the foundation. It's kind of like upstream, downstream of yourself. And obviously you meet people in between, but like when you talk about, because it's something I've, you know, I don't think about it necessarily right this second, but as you're going.
Sorry, guys.
No, you're good.
I have pictures. Remember?
Oh, yes.
I'm so sorry. Thank
No,
you so much
you're
for that.
fine.
No, I'm so sorry.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
She has pictures she's got to do for her
Yes.
That's.
graduation
Five.
stuff.
Yeah.
So she's got to get back.
Oh, you
So
got.
sorry.
Yeah, you got to drive too, don't you?
Thank you so
Okay.
much for having me.
Yes,
Oh,
very,
yeah.
very good.
I forgot to tell you that on the initiation. of
That's
this.
okay. That's okay. So it's all good. So, but yeah, I think of the upstream, downstream, but then you go back to like, is there any type of, you know, I think most people, and I think one of the things that Liam mentioned early on, I think we were talking about the texting with your grandparents, like at the table. One thing I've put more emphasis on probably the last couple of years is the idea of time, but you only have so much time, which obviously is not a, if I told someone that, they'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But when you really ingrain it, like you know, really ingrain it, not just like I know on the surface level, but then when you really think of like what's important, how do I want to use my time, how do I not want to waste my time, I think, and then you start thinking of, well, when I die, like what happens? Like naturally, you die, and I think it's pretty, unless you're some huge outlier, you're basically 2 generations from nobody remembering who you are. Like my great grandparents, I know of them. My great never met them. Like I know them by name, but I had no relationship, even though they're in direct line of me. So I think me not being, you know, this being naive and being like, I'm going to do cool things and everybody's going to remember me. Like I know that's not going to happen, and nor do I want to ever. I don't want to put the time in to do that. I don't want to put the input in to be like this crazy outlier person. But I do look at it, okay, what is my legacy or what can I do? And I said, well, naturally, it's like, what can I do now to have a positive impact on people that live beyond me, which my initial is my kids, trying to be like learn and become the best version of myself so I become one of the best teachers for them. Obviously, they're going to meet other people in life, but trying to get them off on that initial start. And actually, Tom, you're the one that the podcast the biggest thing that stuck with me the last time we spoke was when you talked about young people, like young kids, and how experiences they have at that early age, like childhood trauma, sticks with them for their entire life. And I remember there's been a few instances I've made decisions. I don't know, it was probably 2 years ago now he came on. There's time, I swear this is, that conversation comes back to me, and there's decisions I've made where I'm like, this is going to be a better opportunity for them now, where I could hear, like, it doesn't matter, they're 6 or they're 4 or they're whatever, like, they're not going to remember this or whatever. And I go back to them, like, they probably won't remember it on this, like, be able to recall it, but it's going to be so ingrained in them that it's going to have potential downstream effects later in life. And this isn't major stuff, but it's just as simple as, hey, like, where we send them to school. Like, I think it's a great starting point for
How old are your kids?
4, 6, and 7.
Can I give you a little upgrade to this?
Sure, love it.
I think this would be good for you.
Yeah.
I've got 4 kids, 27 down to 21.
Yeah, I knew. Yeah.
So I've been through the fire, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. No, I love my kids. Like, I think I have great relationships with all of them today, but definitely tricky. Navigating those waters. As a dad, you're going to want your kids to come to you whenever they go through something difficult. Mm-hmm. And you're going to say, you can talk to me, buddy. But you ever think about why young people don't talk to their parents about some of the traumatic things that happen in their lives?
Is it because they might have caused it?
Let's say your daughter is assaulted by someone. That's a horrible thing to think about. A lot of young people won't bring that information forward. That's a very extreme example. But eventually, young people stop talking to their parents, especially their fathers, about certain things. And I had this epiphany recently, reflecting on my own children, and they've come to an age now where they're starting to come back to me, and I'm like, phew, I guess I didn't screw them up that bad. And they like me, actually. And there was a couple of years, and 2 of them didn't talk to me for a year because I was the tyrannical father that Carl Jung said a child needs to have in their life. You have to have that devouring mother and that tyrannical father, and these archetypes balance each other out. And if you don't have one, you can't actuate properly into adulthood. But I had this epiphany recently. I'm a big Immanuel Kant fan, and Kant said that 2 things fill my mind with a sense of awe and wonder, something like that. He said the starry skies above and the moral code within. And I believe that there is this indelible moral code that's prescribed. I mean, that killing someone is wrong. That stealing from someone is wrong. I mean, we know these things inherently. Little kids understand these axioms that somehow, whether it's through some design or some maturation, evolutionary development, we develop these things, and it's just part of our species now. And when you as a father, I haven't thought about this in a little while, so I'm just teasing this out for you, but when you as a father correct your child on the things that you think are morally or ethically questionable, you do something to your child because you were taught to correct them and to tell them that they're wrong, that they shouldn't do that. But we do it as fathers a little bit more tyrannically than we should. And believe me, I believe in kids towing the line. I believe in having high standards for myself. It's one of my core values. I believe in having high standards for the young people I'm around, for my family. But it's funny. What tipped it off for me was I was thinking about my daughter, my oldest, and when she was about 2, and she was in the pool one day, and we were at some public pool, or I don't remember where it was, and she's in the pool, and I'm watching her, and she does the little pee-pee shiver, And I said, Abigail, did you just pee in that pool? And I hammered her. I remember it to this day. And I saw her little eyes just go, just get wide. And, here's this superhero in her life, this person that is her defender. I mean, Freud said that, I can't think of anything more important than the protection of a father in the development of a young person. There's nothing more important, because that gives them that sense of security, that they can be who they want to be, that they can express themselves. They got to have a father's leg to hide behind it. And I don't want to get into a debate of a child that's robbed of their father, but it's very, very important. And I realized recently that with my own kids, that I taught them how to hide stuff from me. Very innocently. And I told them that you should hide stuff from me. And I never thought about it like that until recently. Because that silly little situation with her peeing in the pool was, something that ethically or morally, maybe she shouldn't have done. And I think about it now, if I was her father today, I think I would have gotten in the pool next to her and said, ooh, I think I'm going to pee here with you. Ooh, how would you like that? You see how Liam reacts to that, And, ooh, is it warm? I just peed too, or we could think about why it would be a bad idea. But I think as fathers, we end up just hammering our kids because we were hammered. We were taught to, the rod of discipline. And yeah, like I said, I believe in having high standards for behaviors especially. But I just realized from my own kids that their inability to express themselves, to express the trauma, the difficulty that they've gone through, is really largely because of me as a father. Because I didn't give them that grace as a child, especially around these things that have to do with the moral code within. And as dads, we tend to do that to young people, our own children, is we think we got to really hammer them over these poor choices that they make.
Yeah, that hits home. I think the thing that this is like a big focus of mine is stuff like this, where it's, you're trying, in my head, like I said, my natural reaction is always, like you said, to come down, just because, it is what it is. But I think the thing that that helps me through it a lot is like when, especially my oldest, who, the thing is with my second and third child, I've already been at that stage. So I've kind of can navigate it a little bit, or I know what to expect. My son is like the trailblazer because he's teaching me how to be a father.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I remember, and I've always been a little more of a soft spot for him because I go back to him, like he's seven, so I try to go back to, what was I doing at 7? What doesn't he know right now at 7 that he just doesn't have those, he doesn't understand. It's easy for me at 35 to bark out something. Well, I've gone through it. I got my brain's developed. I've had all these things. Here's a little kid that's just trying to figure life out. And I think that's something that I pause and, I try to catch myself. Am I perfect? No. Is there times where it catches me off guard and it's just like, but I try to be like, hey, my makeup for it is I try to apologize for him. Like if I do something where I'm like, hey, buddy, I shouldn't have, it's not a big deal. Let's talk about it. Because like sometimes my reaction is like, you're human. It just happens. But then trying to be aware enough to say, I got to go back and we got to have like a talk about it. Because my thing is, if I put myself in his shoes, if I'm 7 years old looking up at dad, who, I don't take myself that serious, but like he does. And
Very serious.
Yeah. So when he looks up and I'm screaming at him, and all of a sudden this is the person that should be like my biggest fan is screaming at me, and it's not because we're mad. It's because we're trying to protect him. We're trying to teach him or whatever. Like we're not coming from a negative spot, but in his eyes, it's such a big emotion or such a big awakening of like, oh man, dad's yelling at me, and like, am I not good? Does he not love me? All these thoughts I know are spiraling through his brain where it's like, no, sorry, buddy, it's not that big of a deal. Like, I'll help you clean it up. I'll pick it, whatever it might be. You peed in the pool, not a big deal. You wet the bed, not a big deal. But, and that's one of the things that, is when the kids are going through like the potty training stage and they pee the bed, it's not like, oh my God, you peed the bed. Like, come on, man. Like don't pee the bed. It's more of like, hey, it's fine. We'll clean up the bed. Like, just change your pajamas, like let's get a diaper on, like, and I try to downplay it, and then we talk about stuff, but you're trying to guide and teach and try to educate them the best you can, and a lot of it too, it's I go back to, this is where I find maybe one of my better attributes, I think, is I try to give myself some grace where I'm not as critical. Some people might say like, hey, you're critical. Sometimes maybe I'll say it, but like in my head, it's more of like, no. I mean, it's just like my internal dialogue is like almost like coach player, like, hey, you missed that pass, but that's fine. Like, we're going to start drilling that down, or we're going to like use it as a teachable moment. So a lot of it in my head is, even with stuff I do as a kid, I'm constantly like self-evaluating and saying, okay, could you have done that better? Like, that wasn't your best. You could be better. It's not like you could be better, like you're terrible, punch myself down, but it's more of like, hey, be aware, like that wasn't your best. Like, what can we do to get better? Or, hey, lately I feel like I'm this Debbie Downer and I feel like I'm, woe is me. And it's like, well, let's get beyond that. Like, you're not a victim. You're not this, you can figure this out. Like, what do you got to do? Who do you need to talk to? What resource do you need to go find? Versus just, completely complaining about stuff or just saying, I'm no good, I can never figure it out. It's like, well, no, you can. You just got to figure it out. And it's not easy. And this is something I've been saying a lot, is like, it's simple but not easy. But you know what to do. And it's like, just constantly keep that in your mind and try to hit that North Star of like trying to get better. So I think that's maybe the kid aspect, because I just spend a lot of time knowing that I think ultimately, kind of going however long I live, you just kind of look at like at the end, like one of my things I hope to accomplish is that I can I have a really good relationship with my kids, but they're also really good people that can hopefully grow from what I've taught them and be better for the next generation or their kids, hopefully, or whoever they affect in life. And I think that has been something that I've really switched focuses on, almost as, and I think it's and Tom, I'm sure you can relate. Like the first time you hold your child, which I had this moment the first time in the hospital with my oldest, I was like I don't even, it's like that biological, like you said, maybe primal instinct of like, this is my kid. But then I've gotten to the point where nothing else I really feel like that I do in life matters. At this stage of my life, it's more of like my goal and my thing. Like I've stepped back in a lot of things because my focus is really trying to be there, spend time with them, really soak up the time with them, but also try to teach them.
Which is a two-edged sword.
And what I'm going with that is, I know at some point in time, like the people that I don't identify as like I'm just a dad, but right now that is the biggest hat I wear, because I want to have. I heard this thing recently. I say recently, probably in the last year, that you only get 10 years with your kid, like truly 10 years before all of a sudden they're too cool for school and they kind of leave the nest and whatever. So one goal selfishly is I want to spend a lot of time with them because I know it's going by way too quick. Number two is I want to be there because I want to establish kind of like these baseline foundational parent-child relationships that I know, yes, it's going to go up and down. I know just, life happens. But I'm hoping that I set a good enough example where they take the good and they can build off of it, and that we still have a good relationship, and that hopefully they come. And I think you try to fill in gaps where you feel like you don't have it. And I think that's something natural. Like when you mentioned, am I going to go to my parents and talk about stuff? Probably not. And I think a lot of it is, my, from a, like my parents were great, but I think from a disciplinary thing, I definitely got more of that like hammer down where it's like, don't do it. And I think, and now if I look at it, I'm like, I don't remember any instance off the top of my head that was ever like that. But I'm like, that was how he would have reacted. I mean, there's nothing that stands out as a singular event. But when you talk about that ingrained nature, I'm like, yeah, there's probably some mental trauma that I've had since I've been 2 or 3 that I just have no clue what it is, but it's so like deep in your anatomy that you just don't even know it's there, but that's how you are. And for me, it's kind of reacting like, okay, I don't like this about myself. How can I maybe be better for my kids? And this is no shot at my parents, because I'm sure they learned from their parents and kind of downstream all the way. So then that's something I take, is kind of analyzing how do I remember childhood, or how was my relationship, and then what do I like about it? Let me keep those going, and maybe I didn't like this. Let me try to improve on those areas. And then And like I said, I'm not gonna be perfect. My kids will do the same with me and be like, well, Dad was bad here, but he was really good here. And hopefully it's enough where, like I said, it sends them off wherever they go in life in a better foot. But it's tough, but that's like a mental thing I think about too. And I feel like having kids, parents, friends and stuff, and you kind of have different relationships now, that it goes back to that empathy. Like I'm more empathetic now than I was pre-kids. I'm more understanding. I'm more, especially when you get, politics is a big one right now with people. And people are like very divisive both ways, but I also look at everybody has a viewpoint, and not to diminish someone else's viewpoint, even if I may not agree with them, but kind of understanding why they think that way or what might be important to them. Or, I might say I can't believe that person did this, or I can't believe they believe that. They're like kooky and everything else. But I'm like, there's plenty of people that say the same thing about me, and it doesn't mean either of us are right or wrong. But where are they coming from? What was their life experience? What may have triggered that care that they have for that specific topic? And I think kind of just trying to be more well-rounded of like understanding like, I wouldn't have done that or that. I don't really feel strongly about that, but I also feel strongly about things that they would think are silly.
That's the cool thing about Circle is, not to derail this, because I had a million things to say about your children, and I do this dirty bit to principals all the time. I don't think I said this to you before, but I'll go into big auditoriums with the principal, and there'd be about 20 parents when you do these evening presentations. About 20 parents show up, and it's the 20 that don't need to be there, right? Yeah. You talk to 2,000 students in the day, and 20 parents show up, and I usually walk over to them, and you'll like this, Gaelan, and I'll say to the principal, I said, what are the 5 most important things in your life? And they'll say my kids, my significant other, my belief system, my faith, my thing. And for some people it's podcasting. For some people it's poetry. For some people it's camping. So usually you get out of them what their thing is. And they say, what? And number 5, they'll usually say their job or their career. And I say, oh, great. Those are the 5 most important things in your life. And I probably just nailed it in all of you in this room. And I say, how many years did you spend preparing, Gaelan, for number 5 on your list? You want me to answer that for you?
Career?
Yeah, about 20 years. Elementary school, middle school, high school, undergraduate, graduate, whatever, trade school. You got about 20 years of effort into preparing for your job before you got it. Yeah. You buy that?
Yeah.
Okay, how many years, Gaelan, did you spend preparing for number 1 on your list before you got it? You want me to answer that one for you too?
I'll tell you, 0.
About 9 months.
Yeah.
That was your preparation phase. Yeah. But you're going to sit here in front of Liam and I, and you're going to tell me that your kids are the most important thing in your life, right? You already just said that.
Yeah, by far. Yeah.
Right. So how do you square that logically? That you spend 20 years preparing for number 5. And you spent 9 months preparing for number 1, and you'll still sit here and look me in the face and say they're the most important things in my life. Now, some people are going to say, well, wait a minute, Tom, that's just what humans do. Oh, really? Gaelan, what was number 4? Oh, podcasts? How many podcasts do you listen to a week, Gaelan? How many blogs do you go to? How many vlogs do you watch around it? How much coaching do you get? How much time do you spend? And we can make this big, long list of all the effort and time every week, every month, every year you put into number 4 on your list. Now, you ready for the punch in the gut?
Sure.
How many blogs do you go to? How many videos do you watch? How much coaching do you get to become a better father every single week? You should start to shrink in your seat right now when you compare the amount of effort and time you put into podcasting versus the effort and time you put into becoming a better father. Think deeply about that, because you're still going to tell me your kids are the most important thing in your life.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would say, can I answer that?
Sure.
Okay.
But be truthful.
No. So there is, again, I've said this before in the podcast, but there is a newsletter I get every single day, Monday through Friday. I have not missed reading it probably to 2 to 3 years at this point, and it's a quick little thing on parenting. Like, it's just a dad thing. It's like my reset every single day where I just get it, I know it. Like it's just kind of a daily reminder. It's around kind of Stoic philosophy, and but it's put a lot of things in perspective, and it's helped me in a lot of things that we were talking about with like trauma and understanding and giving the kids space and kind of being there to guide them and not tell them what to do, but kind of show like all we pretty much hit a bunch of that. And then I would say the other thing I do, which is it's a little different. I've journaled for my kids every day for over 7 years. I've never missed a day.
Wow.
And
Good for you, man.
Yeah, like I could bring it up. I do it online now because every day I take photos because my thing is my kids will never remember this time. So it's one of the it's probably it means nothing. Me and my wife are the only two that know that I do it. My kids, they're too young to even really know that I do it. I take photos. I think I have over 40,000 photos on my phone, which is funny because we talked about Instagram and whatever. I never post on them. Like those are for me and for the kids. So I would say I do put a lot of emphasis on it because I try to be present. I try to take photos of memory, but also of moments, and I try to, and they're not. Some are candid, some are just make a silly face. Sometimes we're doing it. Sometimes I'm just sitting there and they're in the chair. I'm like, hey, get a picture of me, and they'll smile. And ultimately, what I'm doing is I'm putting in this kind of like lifetime work. I mean, I'll probably stop at some point when they're out of the house, but it's a paragraph I write every morning of every detail that I could imagine from the day prior, with photos, so they can see exactly what they did. They can see exactly. I mean, I'll show you.
Yeah,
I'll just show you guys as you're talking here. So what I would say is I typically either write this at night or in the morning the following day, and the whole purpose of it is so you can call my bluff here, Tom. But
No.
I'm just so this is actually kind of funny. So I didn't start typing it until 2022. My son was born in 2017. I hand wrote every single one. I have a journal. I have them both. I think like thick journals. They're both in a safe at home, like a fireproof safe. So I have those, and then I have, you can see 2002, 370 entries, 364, which I don't know how I missed a date, but I could have also just redid it wrong because 2024 at 367. Some of these are extended, like birthdays might have more photos than other days, so I just put a continuation. I've done 171 days this year, which I can tell you right now, today's the 171th day of the year. But if I click on them, so I guess just kind of putting in perspective, like this was yesterday.
Dude.
This was Sunday, Father's Day. So Father's Day had a little bit more because they had like...
Gaelan, I'm going to send people to you.
That is awesome.
For advice on fathering.
Yeah, I really enjoy...
I say that because,
I don't know why these photos haven't loaded.
You know, what I like to say to parents when they're in this room of a principal and 20 other parents, I say, you all get the gold star because you're doing exactly what I just described. You're putting effort and time in a spaced repetitive practice every day into this journey called parenting. You know, whenever I talk to especially a firstborn, I always tell them, I say, be careful with your parents, be gentle with them. Because you're like a lab rat. They're just trying to not do the crappy things that were done to them. So be gentle with your parents because they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And, this is just such a beautiful description of someone putting daily effort. Because I don't find it very often. Most of the time people, they shake their head and they're like, man.
I try and I always think I can do better. But when you ask that question, I'm like, I actually do. Like, I know. I mean, I listen to podcasts, don't get me wrong, like in the car and stuff, but I'm not listening to podcasts when I'm at home with the kids.
Let me give you the other side of the coin, too, because
Yeah.
you need to have this piece, too. And I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but I think this is from Gene Twangy's work, that, when we were talking a little bit about technology, when you put a phone in a human's hand, you cut their happiness score in half. Think deeply about that one. Because, I say this to parents all the time. I say, finish this sentence. All I want is for my kid to be happy. That's what most parents will say. About 90% of parents will just finish that sentence. And, you get them a phone on their birthday or on Christmas, and they get a great big smile. I love you, Daddy. I love you, Mommy. Good job, Mom. Good job, Dad. You just cut their happiness score in half. And there's only one way to get it back.
Take it away.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Not happening. So what you described here, man, wow. But the one thing I would caution you about, and I'm sure you got this locked in too, but just for people that are listening, you know, we have a generation, you've heard of the helicopter parent and the snowplow parent, and, you know, most people, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan came up with this thing called self-determination theory right around the time Maslow came up with his
Hierarchy
of motivational needs. But most people don't know about self-determination theory, and there's a sub-theory under it called basic psychological need theory. And we all have these basic psychological needs as human beings, and the number one psychological need is that of autonomy or freedom. And you know this when you're kids too. I want to do it myself. And we have a generation that has been completely robbed of autonomy and freedom. And the age of independence for a human mammal is between the ages of 4 and 5. When they leave their mama all day long for like hundreds of thousands of years between the ages of 4 and 5. In the 1950s, to be eligible for kindergarten, you had to walk 4 to 6 blocks by yourself and go into a store and make a purchase. Your wife would never allow that to happen today. So we have stolen autonomy from children in a massive way because we like to be with them all the time, because we like to document everything, take as many pictures as we can, all this stuff. And I'm certainly not criticizing what you're doing. But the second of the great psychological needs is that of competence. All you want is for your children to be competent someday, to pay their own bills, to live on their own. But when you steal or rob autonomy from a child, and we do it so innocently because we just want to be around them all. Let me help you with that, buddy. Let me pick this up for you. Let me tie your shoes for you. It's one of the great mistakes we make as parents, where for all of human history, when a kid was 4 or 5, they were gone from you all day long. And it's only been the last 100 years that we've really upset this apple cart. And now we have a generation of young people, and Gene Twangy writes about this in iGen. Kids are drinking later, driving later, having sex later, all these things, because we just haven't allowed them to just go and figure it out. So, you know, you're a very extreme example of a tremendous amount of effort you put into becoming, because to me, all this writing is about you exploring you and what you're doing that's working and isn't working, and, you know, shortcomings and the gifts of every one of your children individually. You're exploring those things, which is just amazing, bro. It's amazing. It really is. I've talked to thousands and thousands of parents, and I've never had anyone be like, yeah, I journal every day about my kids.
Yeah.
But the only caution I would give you, and again, it's some people may take exception to this, is you cannot actuate properly without autonomy. And all too often as parents, we rob our kids of that, especially in this generation.
Yeah. It's funny because I try to learn from people. And I remember one of the teachers at my kid's school, she goes, we make them do everything. Because I'm like, do they do this at school? She goes, yeah, make them do everything. So it's one thing that I'm trying to identify. Same thing, like, can I have water? Like, go get your water.
Yeah.
Like, I'll unscrew the top if you can't do it, physically do it. But, like, go fill the water up. And we're not at the shoe tying yet. We sew the slips, but it's the same thing. Like, get your shoes, get your jacket on. Like, I'll help you if you can't get it, but that is something that I've and I'm sure I'm guilty of doing stuff for sure, but it is something that I put a focus on of, you know, like, it was actually funny you mentioned that. Like, my daughter yesterday, can I go to so and so's house? It's a neighbor. So I had 2 kids. My 2 boys are playing with the neighbor next door in a backyard, running around. She went like 2 or 3 houses down. And I said, the only thing I said to her, I said, just make sure you look. We have a road, but I go, and it's not a busy road. I said, just make sure you look both ways before you cross the road. She's no, I always look both ways. I said, okay, good. She walked down she's 6, 6. So she walked down.
Good for you.
But it was the same thing. Like, in the back of my mind, I was like, I had this thought. So to prove your point, I was like, man, should I have walked down with her to the door and at least made sure she was safe and, like, got in the house? Not that I was, like, expecting anything crazy, but in the back of your mind, it's like, well, what's the chance a car does happen? Like, this all went through my head. Yeah. I didn't do it. I let her go, but that definitely crossed my mind. But just trying. That was kind of one of those moments. I was like, it was funny because this was literally last night, and she's asked if she'd go. I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Like, and she was fine. She went down. She walked back. So we're doing like kind of the same thing. Trying to. The good thing is my wife we're very much aligned in the way we parent.
Good.
So it's one where we kind of joke, or what you're saying, like my wife would be more apt to just let her walk around the block than I would even be. So I would say my wife's actually more of the don't care. You would.
Good wife to have.
She would have been a fun one to have. But but I mean, I think that does help. So I mean, that goes back to just like your partner that you choose, and that her and I, I think that it's a good balance. But we're on the same page on a lot of things. So we we never fight in front of the kids. Like I say fight, but like we don't
rob them of that too much.
But I'm saying like we're in line. If she says something, I'm not like no, let them do that. Like don't listen to mom.
Right,
I don't do that.
I gotcha.
So we're in line on that kind of stuff. And if there's something we disagree with, like we'll talk about it in private. Of like, hey,
they do need to see the resolution.
Yeah,
it's very important. Resolution.
No, I think that is. I think a lot of it is just not trying to. Like I want them, like if she says something, I want the kids to realize like we're there's not like a 1 and a 2. Like you're listening to mommy and dad, like and I mean the kids kind of joke like mom's the boss, right? I'm like, oh, yeah. I do ask what does mom want to do, but yeah. So I mean, there's, and like I said, this is something that all this is new, and my kid's 7, and I would say leading up to it, I was a deer in the headlights trying to figure it out, and you're just on the fly. But I have noticed that my things in my life have shifted, priorities have shifted, and this is a big one for me for multiple reasons. Like I keep this journal for them. I keep it, like you said, there's parts that I want it because it keeps me on track because partly it is journaling the last 7 years of my life too. So, spending time with them, the best I can. And sometimes, I don't know. Like, I'm like, you guys went to school today. And if I got something out of you, that's a good thing. Like, but they don't share everything, as like every day. So sometimes I'm just like, they went to school. So I only got the morning and the afternoon, and it might be a little shorter. But
and one thing I want you to do for your kids is I want you to write out your core values, the way you live your life. Keep it to 5, maybe 10, and have a...
So I missed the date there. Sorry.
Have a 1 or 2 word explanation, 3 or 4 word explanation for that core value, but also write out what the core value means to you. I did this about 20 years ago, and I've lived and died by a set of core values that whenever I have an issue, I bounce it off these core values, and I'm in the middle of writing up a new set of core values, real personal.
So when you say core value, short explanation, and what was the second part?
Yeah, just have a 2 or 3 or 4 word kind of way to express that core value. But then also take the time to really write a small paragraph, a couple of sentences on the depths of that core value and why it really is central to the way you live your life. And your children have to know those core values. Very, very important. Like one of mine, and I'll bring this back to Circle. When Haley talked about those 4 guidelines, I was trying to get this out of her, but I do a 2-day course on Circle, really, really deep and in depth. And, I don't believe that telling kids to respect each other is a good idea. I say that in front of teachers on purpose to get a little bit of a visceral reaction.
Shock reaction.
Because, you see on the wall, respect is one of our core values. And, I always say to teachers, I say, is there another teacher in this school that you don't respect for how they treat people, what they've said, the way they've acted? And there's not a teacher in America that doesn't agree with that and say, yeah, there's teachers in this school I don't respect. So to get up in front of a bunch of students and say, we're all going to respect each other here, that's not true. You don't know what she did to his brother and what his father did to her mother. Like, you can't expect people to respect each other, right? It's a great ideal that if we were in a perfect world, but if you look up respect in the dictionary, it says earned based on your achievements or your accomplishments. That's what respect is. We can get to respect, we can earn respect from one another, but I think what you're trying to say is dignity, the value, the worth that we all have as human beings intrinsically. And these 4 guidelines, that's what really they protect against. They give you the best shot of dignity in that circle. No talking without the talking piece. Do you remember, can you conjure up that feeling when you were trying to explain yourself as a kid and your old man just cut you off?
Yeah,
Remember?
I'm sure those times.
Yeah.
Sure.
That hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And just because I'm older than Liam doesn't mean I get to just cut him off. Like, that's a really bad idea. That's just me, using this dominance hierarchy to, say I'm more important than what I have to say is more important than you. So what I've learned about that core value, that guideline is, it's one of the number one ways to give people dignity is to just let them say what they need to say. I'm very proud of the fact that I haven't cut off a student in over 7 or 8 years in my life. Even when I disagree with them, I just let them say what they need to say. Number 2, one direction. That's really important, because if I can get this talking piece back and because I disagree with what he says, all it really does is stop me from listening.
Yeah.
Right? And it feels good when people listen to you. And that's the number one thing about Circle. It's about one thing. It's about listening to other people's perspectives. It's fundamentally changed my life, because I just sit in 500 circles a year with Marines, with linemen, with students, with teachers, with other entrepreneurs, and I just get to listen to them. And then that just reorients, the way I think about certain things. Things that I thought about 5 or 6 years ago, I think completely different about them, even at my age. So following that ensures that everyone gets heard. And then note, it's okay to pass. Very, very important. You imagine going to a sports game and not having anyone in there in the stands to watch it? That'd be weird.
Yeah.
But you can't have a good circle without some good watchers either. And being able to sit there, do you know what one of the number one things that makes something play, like true play? You don't have to do it. You don't have to.
Yeah, no obligation.
Right, there's no obligation. If there's one thing I've read about in my life, it's the science of play. And its autonomy is what it is. It's one of the first senses of true autonomy is, I don't want to play with you. You're too rough. You don't give me a turn. I don't like the way this feels, so I don't play with you anymore. This is how kids socialize each other early. We think we socialize kids as adults. We don't. Kids socialize each other into their culture, into their society. So it's very important that when a young person sits in circle, they know I can just sit here and listen. That gets a tremendous amount of buy-in, but it also ensures their dignity. I mean, I hated when teachers made me read out loud. It ruined me as a kid. Like I was not a fast reader, so it just destroyed me as a kid. So when you say that to a kid in a circle, that they can just sit there, whew,
Yeah, absolutely.
man, that feels good. And then whatever happens in the circle stays in the circle is another one. It just ensures dignity. But it also gives a chance for kids to screw things up. Because as she said, that doesn't always happen that way. But that's called responsible decision making. That's the third of the great core competencies for social emotional health. You got to break someone's trust in order to gain it back again. What a great skill to teach a young person. So I had another big point that I was going to make to you about parenting when it came to all these things in circle, and I just can't remember what the heck it was.
That's okay. A couple just quick questions, Tom,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
we'll wrap up for you. So first off, the actual, so Circle, Sweetheart and Heroes, you kind of mentioned the science behind it and the structure of circles,
Yeah.
but you did not create that. That was something you adapted from having taken, like you did your own a handful of years ago, but that wasn't part of the core, like part of this when you started.
Yeah.
So then you just took it, and then have you changed it anyway? Is it pretty much the
the
same?
circle's been a humongous evolution in our world. We go in and we present initially K-12. We have a K-2, a 3-5 middle school, high school, and one of the best, most exciting things in my life was this year, because this thing that we did in I'm going to get a little off track here. Bring me back.
Okay.
This thing we did at Killington. It wasn't just about this Spartan race and this leadership event. It was bringing the students back with our STEP program, our Student Teacher Empathy Program, STEP, making the students the teachers of empathy. What do you mean? It means we taught 6 or 7 schools, the students that came, how to present the K2 and the 3-5 Sweethearts and Heroes message So they became the presenters at the elementary school. And they all went back to their schools and learned this message of Sweethearts and Heroes for little kids and older kids. And they became the ones to teach the message. It was just incredible to watch these young people take this message that Rick and I developed 16 years ago. And so when we talk about the Sweethearts and Heroes core, it's this really neat set of presentations that now we have students doing. But then what do you do on top of that? And that's where Circle comes in. And that becomes this spaced repetitive practice that we leave schools with to try and create these circle cultures where what spaced repetitive practice are you putting in to help young people develop skills like math, science, reading, and all these other great, academic disciplines? What are you doing? And a lot of teachers will say, "Oh, that's not our job." Well, whose job is it to help teach these human skills? You want a kid to behave in school. Where does he learn that? Well, he's supposed to learn it from his parents. Well, they're not. Right? Where are they going to learn these human skills? They have to learn it in this educational environment. There's no teacher, there's no parent on earth, do you want me to call you when your kid misbehaves and you can come in and take care of him, Gaelan? No, I want the school to handle that. Of course you do. And I would get off on a nasty little rabbit hole here on this, just in terms of parents and their opposition to authority and the discipline. And that's my kid. I got spanked by a neighbor once when I was a kid. I remember that. Her name was Wanda Dobson. You think I went home and told my parents that she spanked me?
No.
Of course not, because I was wrong, right? What time do you got to go?
I was going to say, I have...
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No. So I'm going to piggyback off. Before we leave, I guess we could do it quick. It could just be a yes or no. But when you talked about the human skills or the life skills beyond knowledge, like most of the stuff we learn in schools, I mean, you're learning how to think. Most of the stuff you can find on Google nowadays if you truly wanted it. So you would say maybe the core behind Sweethearts and Heroes is really just looking at how do we teach these life skills, meaning how do we interact with people, how do we interact with ourselves.
Imagine we're even asking ourselves that question. Isn't that crazy?
But like I said, the funny thing is when because you just said it, it's okay, we teach them how to do math or read or write or whatever, and then you realize that's a blip of what we do in daily life, where
they're never going to use it again.
Yeah, like calculus. To calculus, I don't even know what calculus is right now, to be honest. If I saw it, I think I learned that with the all the different.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, weird things, but then you go back to how many times do you deal with people? How many times do you talk with people? How many times do you have conflict? How many times do you have to have conflict resolution? Then you realize that's really just life in general. But you're right, we don't. It's kind of the thing that I always hate is when you get out at 18 years old from high school and all of a sudden you're thrust in the real world. You have no clue how money works. You have no clue how health or benefits or insurance or
nothing,
how the world works, how everything's tied together. But I can do calculus or I can do a math problem, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's almost we're missing. I would love to see education in the future evolve into what you're talking about, and then coupled with actual life skills. And then if you wanted to learn math or science, have a basic rudimentary understanding of it. But to me, a lot of the stuff that's advanced in those grades, I went to college, and the first 2 years of college was relearning everything I already learned, actually worse because it was less structure.
Yeah.
So, and I was I just spent a bunch of money for 2 years of doing nothing, and I relearned ninth grade math. That was a joke. Versus if I really wanted to learn math at a higher level, I could go into math. But I don't want to get off on that tangent. So.
I got a huge tangent on that one.
But would that be fair to say that you think that it's around basically teaching life skills or how do we interact with people and ourselves? That's probably the message.
I know you don't want me to go off on a tangent here, but just real quick, I'm on this new kick where I don't think kids need to learn information anymore, and that's offensive to a lot of people.
I see where I see
you have this. Mm-hmm. He can look up anything he wants to instantly. Mm-hmm. Why does he need to know anything anymore? That's tough for a Gen X or even a millennial to handle.
Memorization stuff.
Why do you need anything? Einstein said that, one of his friends was what's your phone number? And he threw him a phone book. And the guy's dude, you're Einstein. This is a true story. Look it up. And he said, and Einstein said, it's in a book. Why do I have to know it? I can look it up whenever I want to. You have a whole generation of young people that don't need to know a single thing anymore. Like, Gaelan, where's your flint and steel that you cooked your pancakes with this morning?
My what?
Your flint and steel. Your fire starter?
It's in the cabinet at home.
But that sounds stupid, right?
Yep.
But to tell a kid he's got to know algebra, why?
Yeah.
He doesn't need that anymore.
Well, I kind of Einstein, but when anybody that I'm like teaching something to, or I tell typically people that I'm showing something to, I say, don't learn to memorize, learn to understand, which came from Richard Feynman's the quote that I had.
Huge
He's a physicist.
Feynman fan.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So he.
That's in our class. Feynman technique is in our class.
Yeah. So and I put it in stuff what I taught too. I'm like, just memorize. Don't memorize this. I want you to understand it. So if you're talking, why are we doing this? Why do we say this? Why do we have it in this order? The kind of roughly this flow. And I said, because if you memorize it, as soon as it goes, perfect example, basketball. I coached basketball for a couple of years. And I told the kids, I said, we can learn plays, but I said, the problem is kind of the Mike Tyson quote, like everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. I said, what happens when that play that we ran, we can run in practice, perfect. Now you put a live game scenario, you got stress, you're tired, you have the other team, people are screaming from the stands. Can you run that under duress? Or can we learn how basketball is played? Can we learn how to move without the ball? Can we learn how to create space? Can we learn how to, use different techniques to get away from a defender? Because you're understanding how to play the game, not necessarily understanding or memorizing. I got to run from here to here instead of pick for Tommy. Well, if you got to realize Tommy's position. Is Tommy open, and can you then go little Tommy Murphy over in the corner? Is he in a position where is that a good position? Well, I have to understand where he's at and then react to it, not just run the Tommy because that's the play says to run the Tommy. Well, what happens if I could just run underneath the basketball under the hoop, nobody's there, and I can just do a backdoor cut and get the ball and go up. Well, understand that versus I just ran randomly out to a spot that the coach told me to run to because I didn't understand what we were doing. I just memorized the playbook. And, that's an example from obviously maybe modified or JV sports or even varsity. But I'm just going back to if you understood the game and the concept of it, you would have a lot more autonomy, freedom within that space, like the true play of sports to just kind of go. It's like the way backyard sports are so much fun because there's no coach. You're just kind of going on an instinct.
Amen.
You're just you learn so much as kids. I think that's one of the. And again, this is a total side topic, but I see. A lot of when I was coaching kids, I saw I started to see that kids had less understanding of the game as they got old. They had more skill because they played it all the time, but they were so structured all the way through that they would understand. They would have better touches and things like they would have better touches, but they'd have more fundamental skills. Yeah. But their creativity wasn't there. And I go back to I'm like, hey, when we were at parties or hanging out with kids, no phones. As before that, we'd take your shoes off, throw it down. There's a goal. And you'd play 3v3 backyard soccer. You'd run around. You're stepping on, pine cones and rocks because you're just playing in the field. But you learn to move without the ball. You learn how to create space. You learn how to try to beat your buddy. You learn you're dying. You're sweating and dirty, and you're having a blast. Well, you take those same moves when you're a senior in high school. Now you're playing against these kids that didn't have that. Like we had a good soccer team growing up. But a lot of us, this is what we did when. Season was 3 months away, and we're sitting there playing because it was fun, and you learn these skills that it was hard to teach. And I found that at least when I was coaching kids, they lost that, so they didn't really understand the game as much. So you're trying to explain to them why you don't understand why we're pulling a defender out to create space. You don't. But I'm like, that's it. They never experienced it. Back to what you said, motion, or we do it. We're not lectured. We're doing it through motion, or we're doing it because we're actually going through or learning by doing. And that's really where it came from. That's where I kind of pulled that concept from. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Last question I want to ask. The 101 class is, and again, Tom, I know we could maybe have you. Well, I say maybe. If you want to come back on, we can always do another back on. But and maybe we can save this for that. But right now you actually have a curriculum that's in schools that is a formal, or Liam, you could even speak to this formal, part of your normal curriculum, right with math, science, or history. You have. Was it the class called?
Leadership.
It's called BRAVES, BRAVES. It's an acronym, but they call it leadership at Peru. It's just the simple term.
But it's actually on your calendar or schedule?
Yeah. Every other day they get credit for it. They actually get a cord when they graduate.
Yep, I did get a cord. Yep.
Okay. Yes.
And there's actually 4 levels of it. Peru is starting 104 this year, but they have 101, which will be for 9 through 12. They have 102, which is for 10, 11, 12. 103, which is for 11th and 12th graders, and then they're starting a 104 now.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have a Braves Junior that precedes it at the middle school level, which is about a half a year.
And how long has this been going on?
At Peru, the leadership class is probably 4 or 5 years now.
In general, like when was this first class ever implemented?
5 or 6 years ago, they had 6 students, 6, that started it when we proposed it to Peru. Today, they have over 100. They have, 5 sections of 101? 5.
Yep.
So
They
it
have a
started at
waiting
Peru?
list. Yeah. Well,
Oh.
no, we've started at a different school, but Peru is probably the most advanced in what we do.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And they have a waiting list for the class.
Literally.
Yeah,
wild.
yeah.
That's awesome.
But it's a self-directed class, largely by the students, and they spend a tremendous amount of time in circle, learning the art of circle. They spend time every other day in circle. But just give them a little nugget about the class, man.
Yeah, especially in 101.
Sorry, Liam, this is probably, 2.5 to 3 hours a week, roughly?
Every other day.
Yeah.
40
it's-
minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, 1 week we got 2 days, and then the other week we got 3 days. So that'd probably be about,
Okay.
about
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
80 to 120 minutes a week. Anyway, the 101 really focuses on repetition of circle. Like every time we go in there, we're getting we're picking who's doing the activator, and our instructors I had Miss Anna Stitt and Miss Jennifer Gay, whose name recently changed, but I know her as Miss Gay. Anyway, they instructed us on the guidelines, the obvious I say the guidelines, but almost like the obvious what's the word? Just you don't want to go to confidentiality. That's the word. It's obvious that you want to be confidential, especially in something that could be so soul opening in a way. Like what you said earlier. Like you're trying to put your soul
Like
into
vulnerable.
this. Yes, vulnerability is huge.
Yeah.
Like we had the analogy, why is Superman so strong? Because he opens his chest, right? Makes himself vulnerable. And that was like our first lesson in 101. Yeah, like I said, I'm very forgetful, but it was all repetition. And then this year it was more, okay, we started off with a step program, and a couple of the students in our class didn't want to follow through with it or whatever. So we were doing the step program for a while, and then we just kind of started branching off, and recently we kind of wrapped it up with our own Spartan race at Peru. That was kind of like our final project, well, at least for me, being a 102 senior. It's like our final project, which was very good. It was a very good way to go out. But yeah, like I said, 101's repetition, 102 is kind of polished.
That 101 class has a couple of units. You have a circle unit, but you also have a play unit. Huh? You learn about the science of play. You learn that every kid has a play personality. You learn that everyone has a play history. And if you wanted your own children, Gaelan, if you want them to find joy in their life, not happiness, joy, they must tie their play personality, and there's 12 big play personalities, and their play history to their adult life. You always find joy when you do that. That's how we find joy in life. So we learn about play. The Feynman technique, right, is one of the units.
Okay.
It's funny you said
Love
that. We do have an empathy unit. So we have these units of these things that they learn in terms of the fundamentals for what true leadership is when it comes to whether it's their culture, whether it's their generation, or whether it's just leadership as a human being, and knowing some of these great fundamentals. So that's the 101 class, and then of course it progresses, and there's a full curriculum for 102, 103, and we're developing a 104 next year for Peru.
Well, Tom, for the sake of time,
Yeah.
we'll wrap up here. Like I said, I'm sure we'll get together again, and I feel like every time we end, there's like more hours I could keep going.
We haven't even scratched the surface.
I know,
man.
and then, but like I said, we'll table it to the next one for episode 3 with you guys. But I want to thank obviously Tom for coming here and doing this again,
Yeah.
and reaching out. And I've talked with. I've had Matt on. I've had obviously the initial one with you, and then a lot of the stuff that you send me. Like I said, I do actually watch those videos and follow you guys online. And then Liam, I appreciate you coming on. And Haley's not here, but just to hear people in your position, in your age, speaking how you do, and kind of carrying yourself and trying to pass it along. Because again, was the best way to learn through teaching. So I think that you guys are going to get a very high degree here in human connectivity and everything else going forward. So, but yeah, I love the program, and obviously I think the biggest thing that I've noticed that every time I see photos or events, kids look like they're having fun.
Yeah.
Like whatever the science is behind. I mean, we dove into some of it today, but it definitely seems like it works. And I said, if nothing else, it seems like kids are having fun. And I think the other thing is they're having fun with each other, meaning there's, it's collective. It's not just, you see a group of people, and I don't think there's anybody that's just like, this is terrible. It seems like everybody's excited. And obviously looking at the photos here, it looks like there's a lot of, acceptance and a lot of empathy and a lot of, teamwork and a lot of, our belief in each other. And I think a lot of the stuff that carries on throughout life. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of adults, as we get older, we lose our way with a lot of this stuff. And I think, you kind of go back, and I think that's, I've talked about my kids quite a bit here today, but, seeing stuff through their eyes for me allows me to get transported back a little bit to, kind of simpler times and fun times. So I think that's also a good, exercise each day that I get to, take part of that's helped me, in different things. So, but yeah, I want to thank you guys both. Sweethearts and heroes, both plural. I always just want to say sweetheart, but sweethearts and heroes. I follow them on Facebook. Just punch it in exactly how I just said it. And like I said, they're very active on, different platforms and stuff. But I think, is that probably the best one to go to? Facebook's probably,
Yeah.
I mean, you have the
Instagram,
website and stuff, but I feel like this
website,
gives
yeah.
a lot of the real time. 2 hours ago, there's, while we were on the podcast, there's, photos being uploaded, and
those are older students reading Rick's book about his dog to little kids. Oh no,
Yeah.
that's the coloring book right there. But we have older kids that read Rick's book.
And the thing is, like, I have kids that age that would be
Yeah.
just like that if an older kid read a book to them. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But no, I want to thank you guys both.
Yeah, man.
My pleasure.
Loudon,
for
thank
sure.
you. I'm sure you're heating up back there, and Abby was probably the smart one getting out of here and getting some cool air. But all right, everybody, episode 294, the Gaelan Trombley Show. We are out.